Channel 8 is now live.
Great. Go ahead and push the button, Brenda, please.
You're all set.
Okay, great. Well, welcome, folks. This is the December 7, 2021 study session of the Boulder City Council. This is actually our last study session of 2021. For those of you who are new attendees to our study session, I just wanted to mention why I'm going to be facilitating tonight's meeting rather than our mayor, Aaron Brockett. We have a tradition that we started a couple of years ago where for study sessions, council members, other than the mayor, would take turns facilitating the study sessions. And so I'm next in line on that. And then starting in the new year, I think we'll be going through alphabetically through each of the council members other than the mayor to run study session. And that's a really great equitable way to do it. Gives everyone an opportunity to lead a meeting and get some visibility and gives the mayor, quite frankly, a break. And so by law, the mayor must still run the legislative sessions or every other meetings on the first and third meetings of the month, but on the study sessions, council members will all take turns. I wanted to also welcome on board our new city attorney, Teresa Tate. Last week we bid a fond farewell to Jacob Lindsay, and tonight we have the opportunity to welcome our new city attorney, Teresa Tate. So welcome on board, Teresa.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be with you.
We're happy to have you. I think we have one announcement before we get into our study session itself. I think we have a slide on that. Yeah, there we go. Thanks. So as we have been doing for the last few months, we wanted to remind people that super important to get your vaccine, both your first shot and your second shot, and now to get your booster. And you see there on the screen where we can get information on where vaccines can be provided, and there'll be some very nice people that are happy to provide a vaccination or a booster to you. So please do get vaccinated. It's our best defense against COVID. And then finally, I wanted to recap our agenda before we launched into it. We actually have 4 things tonight. It's a little longer study session as far as topics, but we'll try to still get wrapped up by 9:30. We're going to start with a presentation on racial equity. Then we'll move into a presentation on snow and ice clearing. Then an update on Vision Zero. And then we'll finish the meeting in kind of a group effort around assignments of each of the council members to various boards and committees. And with that, Chris, I want to turn it over to you to kick off the racial equity presentation.
Great. Thank you, Bob, and good evening, council members. I am here pinch hitting for Nuria tonight. So as Bob mentioned, we've got 4 agenda items. The first is an overview on our racial equity efforts. Amy Kane, our racial equity program manager, is going to lead that conversation. And part of the timing of this is really as a part of the series of conversations leading up to the council retreat, being able to have kind of a shared foundation of where we've been and where we're going related to racial equity as an organization. We felt was a critical item, and the retreat committee felt it was a critical item. So that is why we're here today, and I'm super excited to turn it over to Amy. So take it away.
Thank you so much. Carl, I think you're going to you're so amazing. Look at that. He's pulling up the presentation for me. That's great. And if we could get the other view of that, that would be great.
So if you go up to display settings up there in the middle, Carl, you should be able to swap.
No spoilers, right?
No spoilers.
Stealing my thunder. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for having me here with my colleague, Ryan, who's going to also be joining me in tonight's presentation. I love getting the opportunity to present to you all. It's just such a great opportunity to share the good work of colleagues across the organization and really inspire you all to help make this work a reality. So my name is Amy Kane, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I identify as a white cisgender female. I did grow up locally, mostly in Estes Park, and I spent a few years attending elementary school in Boulder. I did go to CU for my college degree, go Buffs, and I've worked at the city since 2015 in various capacities. Boulder has changed a lot since I was a kid and a college student, and even most recently over the last few years. And the community has always had a really special place in my heart, as I know it does for all of you. And it's been an honor to lead the city's racial equity work as we work towards a more equitable community for not only the people who live, work, go to school here and recreate here, but also my colleagues within the organization. So I wanted to thank all of you tonight particularly for being here, as many of you are new to council, and it's such a great opportunity to get to meet with some of you. I'm looking forward to getting to know you over the next year, couple of years, how long it is that you all will be on council. And with that, I'd like to just step back so my colleague Ryan can introduce himself.
Hello, good evening, Council. Ryan Hinton here, he, him. I serve the people of Boulder as an engagement specialist within our communication and engagement department, and appreciate the opportunity to be here to share more about the city's work with racial equity and some of the work ahead. Thank you.
I also want to thank Carl for stepping in and advancing our slides tonight. It's always challenging when you have to kind of do both for a presentation. So thank you so much for doing that, Carl. And with that, I'd ask that you go ahead and advance to the next slide. So we've done our introductions, and if you could go ahead and go to the next one. So our agenda tonight, we're going to go over how we got here, high-level racial equity plan, what we've got in flight currently, some of our 2022 racial equity plan work items, your role as policymakers, and then we'll go into a little bit of next steps and then any questions that you all might have. So next slide, please. So first, I always like to start these conversations. I was wondering that too. Is everybody seeing the full slide or only part of the slides?
Only part.
Only part.
Yes, yeah, it looks like part.
Yeah. Is that what you were raising your hand about too, Aaron?
Yeah.
Mayor Brockett, apologies.
Call me Aaron, please.
Okay.
Amy.
Maybe Carl, we unshare and try sharing again. Yeah.
Is that better? That looks better on my end. Okay, awesome, cool. So as I was saying, I really think it's helpful whenever we have these conversations to really get some clarity of the difference between equality and equity. A lot of people use these words interchangeably, and what we need to understand is before we can even get to equality, we have to focus on equity. What we know is that race is the greatest predictor of one's access to success measures in our current systems, and that racial inequities, they're embedded into government at all levels, which really has caused disparate impacts on communities who've traditionally been excluded by government and other institutions. So by focusing on advancing racial equity initially, that gives us the opportunity to introduce a framework, tools, and resources that can also be applied to other priority populations based on ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, ability, class, age. These are just among some of the populations. Really, if one of us suffers, we all suffer. And so racial equity is really closing the gap so that race does not predict one's access to success while also improving outcomes for all. And to close the gaps, the City of Boulder government is shifting its focus on communities of color to support those who've unjustly been burdened by racial inequity. And so equity versus equality is when we're really teaching everybody the same, regardless of their circumstances or whether their outcomes remain equal. Equity acknowledges that different people start in different places due to a racist historical context and societal circumstances, and levels the playing field. So for everyone, so they can achieve success equally. So if you look at this slide, the Boulder way is to really do this through bikes. So that's, if we gave everybody the exact same bike, we'd be treating people equally, but we wouldn't necessarily be giving people what they need from an equity space. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so Boulder's history, like most of the others in the US, is one of colonialism and racial oppression. And while white settlers began to prosper in Boulder County, racism rears its head in many forms, including the KKK and other racist organizations. Throughout the war and post-war decades, segregation existed in Boulder as it did elsewhere in the nation, and the disparity gaps widened. Those disparities they still exist today. You can see a lot of this information in the city's human services strategy, which references several ways in which historically excluded community members are experiencing disparities by income, affordable housing, health, and education, just to name a few. And this graphic, what you see here is a race dot map. It shows the city population as different colored dots for various racial ethnic groups. So the blue dots are for white residents, green for African American, or Black community members. Red represents Asian Americans. Orange represents our Latinx community members. And what you can see is even though the city didn't have housing segregation policies like redlining, you can easily spot the manufactured housing communities in other areas where non-white community members reside. So next slide, please. Thank you. And so I know many of you know this. Racism manifests itself at 3 levels, which interact as cogs in the very complex system that perpetuates racial disparity. So institutional racism are policies, practices, and procedures that work better for white people than for people of color. And that's often unintentionally or inadvertent. Structural racism, not always, but often, structural racism, how the lack of affordable healthcare and access to affordable, healthy food options, you couple that with higher exposure to toxic chemicals and other forms of pollution. You couple that with job discrimination and housing segregation, producing greater health problems, shorter lifespan. You get the idea. So structural racism, right, takes all of those different institutions, all of those different policies, programs, and really creates that structural racism. A lot of people, when they first hear the term racism, they immediately think of individual racism or prejudgment. So bias or discrimination by an individual based on their race or ethnicity. And our city racial equity work is focused primarily on the institutional and structural levels, which do require, but go beyond addressing racism at the individual level. So while most of the work we do focuses on programs and policies, where funding is allocated, we do focus on the interpersonal level as well. So as many of you are aware, we do have a bias and microaggression workshop, which is mandatory for all city staff, our colleagues, as well as for council members. We do have this as a train the trainer model in which city staff are being trained as equity ambassadors to help facilitate the sessions, but they also go beyond that and provide themselves as resources and coaches for colleagues across the organization. Next slide, please, Carl. So back in 2018, the City of Boulder became members in partnership with other communities with the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, also known as GARE. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about the GARE training, the GARE work, and I always want to remind people that this is not GARE's work, this is our work. We're the ones who are responsible for making sure this work happens within our organization and our community. But GARE is a national network of local governments who are working to achieve racial equity and advance opportunities for everyone. So when we started GARE, I think there were about 50 communities across the United States who, like us, were focusing on institutional and structural racism with the belief that local and regional government has the ability and the responsibility to implement policy change at multiple levels and across multiple sectors to drive larger systemic change. We're currently, I think the GARE member network is over 200 now, and it's growing constantly. There are communities across the country, which has been incredibly helpful for us as we embark on our work. It gives us a lot of different partners, subject matter experts, and so we can find out what's working, what's not working, and rely on a bigger network. Next slide, please, Carl. And so this is what is known as GARE's model for change. And so this is what most communities adopt as their own model for change, and one that we have adopted as well. And the theory really centers on the visualization of racial equity through a cycle of normalizing. So thinking about trainings, getting people familiar with the terminology, the concepts, and really starting to build that movement within the organization to enact change. Then we go to organizing, which the last February, adopted racial equity plan really fits into this space. And that outlines policies and cultural transformation through its goals, strategies, and actions. Then we get into this operational phase, which is really where we are now. And we're in all of them, but really right now, we're starting to put the plan into action and really starting to implement the tools and collecting data to assess our results. And you can see that this is an iterative process. And since this is the first racial equity plan, we do think that we are going to have to do some updating along the way. And continually evaluating and adapting over the next 3 years. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about the resolutions that have been passed. Excuse me. So back in 2015, the city adopted Resolution 1178, which was an opportunity to reaffirm Boulder's status and a commitment to being an inclusive community. At that time, this was a solid opportunity to gain commitment from that council. And then again, 4 years later, some of you participated in this in 2019, the city re-upped its commitment through the adoption of Racial Equity Resolution 1275. I think one of the key differences that I found between the resolutions was the commitment and the ownership that members of that council had to shift the focus from an inclusive community, but one that really focuses on how we advance racial equity and to that of moving towards an really anti-racist decision making. So one of the requests in that resolution is for council members to attend the same racial equity workshops as city staff, including Advancing Racial Equity, the Role of Government, and our Bias and Microaggression workshop. Details about both of those workshops were outlined in the memo for this study session, so hopefully you were able to get information on that. And then I believe our colleague Taylor sent you a doodle poll, I think it was maybe yesterday, about an opportunity to participate in advancing racial equity, the role of government. And I wanted to extend that. I know some of the existing council members, have already taken that workshop. That one is a 4-hour workshop, but I would also lift up that this is the type of thing that hearing it once or going through the process once is often not enough. And you get more and you learn more the more times you do it. So I just want to offer up, if any of the existing or previous council members want to participate again, we'd be happy to have you join your new colleagues. It's also a great opportunity to connect with each other in this work. Another action that the resolution directed staff was to draft the racial equity plan as a roadmap that's really helping us guide this work through prioritization of goals, specifying details, assigning resources, both financial and human, to really activate meaningful change. Adoption of the plan was a brilliant exercise in thought and commitment, but right now we recognized at the time of adoption, and we recognize that right now that adoption of a plan isn't enough. And what we need to do is take that action. And that's what we're here tonight to talk a little bit about what we're going to do. I do want to lift up, however, that the resolutions are an important element in operationalizing equity. And it's a really helpful tool as policy makers for you to be aware of that. And so, Council Member Spear, I wanted to thank you for your requests. I'm trying to address, Ryan and I already wanted to address some of the items that you lifted up in the hotline. And so this is one of those elements where as policy makers, y'all can lean in a little harder. Another area, next slide, please. Excuse me. That is helpful for a couple of you policymakers to join us in is that, staff is planning its first annual update to council about its first year of progress. We also have other accountability measures in place. And one of those includes leadership participation in the city's Racial Equity Guiding Coalition. So the Racial Equity Guiding Coalition is made up of city directors and council members who, in addition to fostering their own development in this space, they're really guiding and supporting high-level strategic planning and implementation of equity initiatives. The first coalitions were responsible for drafting and adoption of Racial Equity 1175 and for the review and guidance of the Racial Equity Plan. And so we're going to be starting the Racial Equity Guiding Coalition back up in early 2022. And I'm hopeful that as you all are considering your subcommittee assignments, that a couple of you will raise your hands and want to participate in this great work. So next slide, please, Carl. And so now we're going to start digging into that plan, and I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Ryan.
All right, thank you, Amy. And we'll move to the next slide, please. tonight we wanted to share a brief overview of the Racial Equity Plan itself. Please know that the full plan is up on the city website. There's a complete logic model there. There's a lot of information to dig into, including community engagement around the plan that helped shape what the plan content is. And so want to mention that, while this was published and adopted and enacted this past February, this has been many years in the making, and includes a 2017 inclusivity community perspectives assessment, stories shared at the Human Relations Commission and City Council, frequent organizations with our frequent conversations with our organizational partners, participation in diversity inclusion summits with CU, and a lot of community engagement with community members of color to understand what's on track and what's missing from a draft of the Racial Equity Plan. And guided by a number of community members who participated in the Racial Equity Engagement Working Group. This was fall of 2019 through the end of 2020, really informed by a dozen different sessions planned and hosted in partnership with community partners, organizations, and community connectors to give feedback on a draft of the plan and let staff know, where we were on the right track and where we were not. And Carl, on the next slide, please. We come to our overarching outcome, that the City of Boulder will advance racial equity by ensuring that its policies, programs, and practices are free from institutional and systemic racism, and that we pledge to work collaboratively to support a high quality of life and access to opportunity for community members of all races and ethnicities. Moving on to the next slide, Carl, please, dives us into the first goal. And again, we're going to keep this high level as we walk through each of these 5 goals. And please note that all of this is a work in progress. The first one here is really laying the foundation. Right? The city will normalize and operationalize understanding of institutional and structural racism, right? That everyone's on the same page. People who work or represent the City of Boulder. This includes city staff, council, boards and commissions, volunteers. Really focuses on equity leadership at all levels, workplace-based equity teams, and providing racial equity training, one that Amy mentioned, and racial equity instrument training as well. Clara, on to the next slide, please. The second one here is straightforward. The city will take action to end racial disparities in city services. And really the first step is achieving that commitment at a government level, really looking at operationalizing the racial equity instrument, and hold that thought. We'll have more on that in a moment. To integrate racial equity into master and strategic plans, as well as stewarding public funds and the city's financial processes. Third one here, on to the next slide, please, really recognizes that the city cannot do this work alone, right? This is impacting our entire community. And the third one represents the city's commitment that we will strengthen partnerships and collaborate with community members and organizations that demonstrate a commitment to ending racism. And this first one here, partner with community, right? Really recognizing that there are many organizations and individuals who have been doing this work very well for a long time. And where we can work together to support and promote the value of this work, as well as diversity and multiculturalism, we want to be sure to do that. Also recognizing the history of institutional racism within the City of Boulder. And on to our next slide, please, Carl. This next one is really looking to engage all people in this work and in community engagement. And so the city is committed to building and maintaining trust, expanding the influence of community members of color through inclusive and responsive engagement. A lot of this centers around improving access to decision makers, supporting city community relationships through staffing, really focusing on high quality community engagement that values lived experience, and recognizing that there are many barriers to community engagement that currently exist, and seeing where we can identify and address language, cultural, and other barriers to access. The fifth one, Carl, if you would, the next slide, really looks at who is making up our organization and commits that the city will eliminate barriers and create opportunities to build a diverse workforce across the breadth and depth of local government, including elected officials, boards, commissions, and working groups, the entirety of our workforce. And onto the next slide, we'll dive a bit into the second goal. Really, the city will take action to end racial disparities in city services. Really relies on operationalizing the city's racial equity instrument. And the 6-step process developed in partnership with GARE may be applied to any decision, whether that's budget or program or policy. Nicole, to your point on hotline, this is not just engagement. This is across our whole organization. And these steps include establishing outcomes, collecting data, determining benefit and burden, developing strategies, implementing and evaluating, and reporting back. And this is the very high level. Staff also developed an accompanying 4-hour training for city staff. To date, we've had 138 staff members participate in this training. And we wanted to share an update on the racial equity instrument in action, but I want to first give a bit of context to that. And so I'll ask for the next slide, please. And wanted to share a bit about the city's team of community connectors and residents, these amazing folks here. And the city's larger community connector model was co-developed with community members and launched in the spring of 2018. Community connectors elevate underrepresented voices and build trust between community members and city government. As community members, they partner with the city to co-design engagement opportunities, share resources and avenues to participate in city decision-making, and surface arising issues or community concerns. They receive a stipend for their commitment, time, and expertise, and are often identified with the support of partner organizations or community leaders. And since 2018, we've had 20 community connectors who have supported a dozen city projects and currently involved in 4 master plans and COVID response and recovery work. And community connectors in residence are not focused on a specific topic or issue. They focus on building the power of underrepresented community members and elevating their voices through reducing barriers to community engagement, sharing feedback on racial equity instrument implementation, and really serve as a bridge for continuing dialogue with community members, both focused on concerns and issues and on ideas and dreams. And each bicultural community connector and resident serves as a trusted voice and works closely with the community that they're already a natural leader in. This may be geographic or cultural, and currently may include Latinx, Nepali, older adult, or low-income community members. They're actively involved in that two-way dialogue again, and part of that work has revolved around 2021 council priorities. So moving to the next slide, please, Carl. This past spring, community connectors and residents reached out to their communities to hear feedback on which 2020 and 21 council priorities most impacted community members of color. And through focus group conversations, interviews, questionnaires, over 100 community members shared their feedback and their lived experience. 86% of participants identified as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. 25% participated in Spanish, 11% identified as youth, 13% identified as LGBTQ+, and 48% had a household income under $50,000 a year. And once the top 5 council priorities were identified from council's whole list of 13, I believe, the top 5 were advancing racial equity, COVID recovery, homelessness, housing, and police oversight. Staff then, representing projects within each of these areas, implemented the racial equity instrument. And so staff, working within these council priorities, formed a cohort that met monthly to share progress, set goals, and discuss challenges. This team also documented lessons learned to really share as case studies with other city staff implementing the racial equity instrument in the future. So briefly wanted to share a few updates from each of these project areas and what this work looks like currently. For advancing racial equity, they focused on improving boards and commission processes. And a cross-departmental team has formed to consider, assess, and implement changes to the city's entire board and commission lifecycle, including assessing barriers to recruitment and retention, and really focusing on increasing racial diversity of board and commission members and ensuring 100% in implicit bias and racial equity core training. With COVID recovery, the team focused on mobile vaccine clinics. And so again, cross-departmental team worked through the instrument to plan and implement vaccine clinics this past summer with a focus on reaching unhoused individuals and communities of color. And this really led to where to hold the clinic, how to do outreach, how to reduce barriers that might keep people from participating, including not requiring advanced registration, providing Spanish interpretation on site. And we're proud that 97 vaccine doses were administered at a mobile clinic at the Atrium building. We estimate that 50 of these doses were administered to unsheltered community members. And then 302 vaccine doses were administered with Orchard Grove Manufactured Home Community and Crestview Elementary School. Homelessness is focused on evaluation of adult homelessness policy changes. And again, cross-departmental team, there's a theme here, included representation from the city of Longmont, which is established in mid-2021 to evaluate imminent changes to the adult homelessness system policies. And this did include Homeless Solutions for Boulder County electing to change policies to allow for the elimination of a 6-month Boulder County residence requirement for the most intensive sheltering services. And the research has also pointed to additional research needed around possible disparities in people's ability or willingness to engage with the system. For housing, this is really focused around eviction protection and rental assistance services program. Began in January 2021 that really established just a continuum of services, legal services, mediation, rental assistance, to prioritize housing stability for City of Boulder residents. And the instruments being applied to creating outreach and data collection processes, making sure that all members of our community are comfortable and welcomed when reaching out for assistance. And the fifth one here, police oversight, has concentrated on ensuring retention of volunteers of color on the police oversight panel. And this panel was established this past February and is currently composed of a diverse population of volunteers per Ordinance 8430, which really strives to include at least half of the members of the panel identifying as a person of color. And in this first iteration, the panel exceeded that goal. And the instrument is being used to ensure that at least half of the panel remains composed of people of color and is really focused on the retention of volunteers of color throughout the term. And so that's an overview of how the racial equity instrument has really been applied to 2021 council priorities. As we look ahead to 2022, we do have community connectors and residents who are currently seeking input and feedback and stories from communities. And we'll share an overview and a summary in January 2022. But more on those next steps coming up. I'll pass it back to Amy here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Carl, if I could get the next slide, please. So here's a list, just a little list of some of the work that our racial equity core teams, work that's happening across the organization that was outlined as part of the racial equity plan work outcomes for 2022. As you can see, it is a big lift, and there's a lot going on in there, but I wanted to lift up 3 specific priority projects that I think would be useful for you all to keep in mind that impact you directly. And one of those areas I want to highlight is our racial equity trainings, as I mentioned before, that we host for city staff, boards, commissions, and council. So in addition to advancing racial equity, the role of government, we host bias microaggression workshops, as well as the racial equity instrument training that Ryan had referenced just a minute ago. Advancing racial equity, the role of government, is mandatory for all city supervisors as well as council. And then it's also part of our new employee orientation, part 2. Bias and microaggression is required for all city staff and council members. Internally, we have a team who's working to put together a condensed version for our boards and commissions, community volunteers, as part of that other project that I'm going to tell you about here in a minute around boards and commissions. So we are also in 2022 going to be working to create a racial equity or a racial affinity policy with accompanying affinity groups for city staff. So we hadn't discussed at this point, Councilmember Spear, thinking about that for boards and commission members, but I think as we do the boards and commissions work coming up ahead, that's a very good idea, depending on if that's what community feels would be helpful. There's often a focus in racial equity work to focus our recruitment efforts for city staff, and then less so on ensuring that our colleagues of color really feel like they belong to the organization. And so I think with the affinity groups, we can help support individuals within our internal community. I mentioned improvement of our boards and commissions project that we've launched. This goes from recruitment to retention to how the boards and commissions are structured. This is already at the beginning stages. We're scoping and we're working on our charter and utilizing the beginning phases of the racial equity instrument for that. We will be working with our outside consultants and also obtaining community input, utilizing, as I mentioned, the racial equity instrument to ensure that our government is really being administered equitably, and that our volunteers are really feeling that true sense of belonging and their impact. So next slide, please, Carl. And then, as stated in the memo and in Council Resolution 1175, this is where we get even more into the nitty-gritty about your role as policymakers. The issues of racial equity have to be addressed proactively and deliberately while taking on an anti-racist approach to this work. And so council members really need to participate in these workshops to enhance your own learning and growth, but also to ensure that policy decisions are informed by race and ethnicity data. This is also an opportunity to learn where others are in their own learning journeys. It's very easy in this work to look to others for solutions or blame people for not knowing about or understanding systems of oppression, power, inequity, bias, and racism. And so that's why it's so critical as this council moves forward in this work to recognize and support people with compassion and kindness to support and advance the growth of others. I think it's really important also that as policymakers, when you're hearing testimonials from community members, that you listen, you believe the stories. It's very easy to get focused on the numerical data, but the qualitative data is equally important and inspiring, but to learn from that and then to act upon it. So next slide, sir. Thank you. So next steps, our community connectors and residents are planning on sharing their community priorities for the 2022 work plan in anticipation of the upcoming council retreat. And then in March, we are hoping, maybe February, March, we're hoping to come back to give a first year update to council and to the community since the adoption of the racial equity plan last year. And then also we're planning on revamping the racial equity plan in 2024. And so next slide, please. And so our questions for you all is, as we do near this kind of anniversary for the racial equity plan, what would you like to hear about in preparation for that presentation? And then also as policymakers, what can Ryan and I do and other city staff do to really make sure that you have what you need to do this work? So with that, I'd ask Carl if you wouldn't mind stopping sharing. That would be great, so we can see everybody's faces. I'm a people person, you'll figure it out.
Well, thank you, Amy and Ryan. That was a great presentation. And for those of us who have been on council for a few years, it was a great refresher and a great update on the great work that's been done this past year. And then for new council members, I hope this is a good orientation and introduction to a lot of work that we have ahead of us. And I also want to call out my colleague Nicole for a great hotline post that she did earlier this week, and it was referred to by both Amy and Ryan. Nicole used the hotline in exactly the way it's supposed to be used, which is to ask questions and to highlight for council colleagues and for staff those issues or questions that that the council member believes should be addressed or that they want to bring up at the council meeting. So it's kind of complies with our no surprises rule, but also helps staff, quite frankly, if they know the questions ahead of time, they can be prepared, as Ryan and Amy were very well prepared tonight, as opposed to kind of springing them on them, and maybe they'll be able to answer, maybe not. So thanks, Nicole, for modeling great hotline practice, and hopefully we can all follow Nicole's example as we go into 2022. With that, let me call on folks who have their hands up to answer the two questions that Amy posed, or to make any other comments. Don't feel like you have to answer questions one at a time. Just answer either or both of them, and then share any other comments or observations that you have about what you just heard. So we'll start with Aaron, followed by Rachel. Aaron.
Thanks, Bob. And I'll echo Bob's thanks, Amy and Ryan. That was an excellent presentation. And of course, that presentation is only the very small tip of the iceberg of all of the phenomenal work that you've been doing on this issue over the years. So thanks for all of that. Just not to answer the question specifically, but one thing I'll just say that I'm really looking forward to is, as we move to the retreat and talk about our council priorities for the upcoming 2 years, to also identify how we can make sure and incorporate racial equity and the various tools and instruments that we have at our disposal in those work plan items. So I'm really hopeful that that can be an integral part of the discussion of our work plan at the retreat. And so hopefully you all will be there to assist us in that process as we tee up the work for the next couple of years.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron. Rachel, and then I think that's the only hand up right now. Folks, feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to comment or answer questions.
Thanks
Rachel.
so much, Bob. And thank you, Amy and Ryan. Excellent presentation as always. You asked two questions and I don't remember what the second one was, but I think the first was, what would we like to hear more about?
Yeah.
And so Aaron was touching on, I think, sort of maybe embedding the racial equity instrument into all the work we do. And that's been just a struggle for me to follow. And I know that we're in different quarters of implementation, but I would like to hear more about how we, in the last year, we have incorporated it and how we're going to do it even more systematically and really embed it institutionally going forward, because it still feels sometimes aspirational, or like somebody needs to say, did we run that through the instrument? And the answer is no. And it's like, how do we get to the point where we don't even have to think about it or ask the question, because it's just so just incorporated into every aspect of what we do. So
Part of our DNA.
Part of our DNA. Thank you. And then you said that the community connectors will be giving us feedback in January. That's, I think, at the 4th meeting, right? Just wondering if there's a chance of getting like a preview or, anything ahead of that, because I know some of us will be thinking pretty hard about our retreat items and plans. We'll have until like the 8th or 9th or something to get our lists fully turned around. And so I would love it if I could get at least a glimpse or any aspect of that ahead of time, so I can be aware of what they're thinking of as I'm working on that over the next few weeks. Not to put anybody out, but if it's sitting there ready, like,
Right.
I'm sure more than me would love to have it early. Thanks. That's all I had.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate it.
Lauren, you're next.
Thanks again for that great presentation. In terms of, things that I feel like might help support council in doing more on these important issues, I kind of had two main thoughts. One was, regarding the memos and the summaries that we get on agenda items for council. There's typically sort of an impact statement on those. And sometimes they feel safe in a way. I wonder if there might be like a posting of a more broad idea of sort of like a spectrum or something, like, or pros and cons, or I understand that there's a little bit of a danger to kind of going too far in that brief statement, but to me, it feels like there's room still to improve on those, potentially bring up more discussion items. And then my other thought was about sort of accountability and recognition. So a lot of what you discussed is kind of about having these inclusive dialogues and things like that. And I think it's difficult to measure what we're gaining from that, but I truly believe that we're inclusive dialogue has a lot of benefits. And to the extent that we can record and celebrate those achievements, I think would be helpful to kind of build momentum.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you. You'll learn that I'm a celebrator. So I appreciate that, and an accountability person. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Lauren. That was great. Tara, you're up next.
I think what would help me is if I knew what our successes have been specifically. So it used to be like this, but now it's like that. It used to be we did this, but now we do that. And I think that would help me to know what to reach for in the future.
Cool. Thank you, Tara.
I don't see any other hands up, so oh, there's Nicole. Nicole, go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry, Bob. You can go ahead if you want. I already.
Okay, well, I was just going to say two things. One is I was going to tell a little story to kind of emphasize the point that Rachel made. About 3 or 4 years ago, Aaron will remember this. We had a council conversation around something that we thought was really going to be cool and nifty, and we got really excited about it. And it was to impose like a fee on gas guzzling cars, like cars that used a lot of gas, and big trucks and so on and so forth. And we got really super excited about it, and we were debating about what size fee and so on and so forth. And the idea was to get people out of those big cars, and into electric vehicles, or even getting out of the cars altogether. And then all of a sudden there was like this pause in our discussion, and somebody realized, well, hold on a second, we haven't thought about equity. We haven't thought about the fact that oftentimes people who are driving cars that may be less fuel efficient are doing that out of necessity, either because it's part of their job or just simply because of economics. They simply can't go out and buy a Tesla. And it was kind of like an aha moment at the end of the discussion. And to Rachel's point, I think what we're trying to learn is how do we bring those types of evaluations to the front of a policy decision, as opposed to having that be almost like an afterthought, like, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? And it's a journey. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. It's not a natural thing for some people to do. And we don't always get it right. But I think we at least intellectually understand that it's important to do. And I think we're trying to get better at it. So I just wanted to agree with Rachel's point there that this is something that we understand, but we haven't gotten there yet. The second thing I wanted to make is that we're not on this journey alone. There are a lot of organizations, a lot of companies, a lot of nonprofits who are going through the same process as the city is. And I'll call out one in particular that Tara's familiar with. Tara and I serve on a nonprofit that supports downtown Boulder. And this is the nonprofit that puts on all these great events like Bands in the Bricks and Munchkin Masquerade and so on and so forth. And they're really cool events, and they've been going on for years and years. But one of the things that our board realized a few years ago is that most recently this year, is while these events are really cool and they attract a lot of people to downtown and they're fun and we welcome people at Boulder's living room, we're not welcoming everyone. There are faces that are not seen downtown or rarely seen downtown. And so one of the things that we've been working on, or the board that Tara and I sit on downtown, is how do we ensure that downtown is not only a welcoming place, but that it's an inclusive place. And welcoming and inclusive are two different things, right? Welcoming is inviting somebody over your house. Inclusive is asking somebody to help you build your house. And so one of the things we're looking at is how do we make events and programs and infrastructure downtown not only welcoming to everyone, but inclusive of everyone. And the only way to do that is to include people of all types and backgrounds into our planning. It's not just planning it for them, it's planning it with them. So I wanted I know this is a daunting task for the city, but I wanted my colleagues and the community to understand that this is a path that many organizations in our community are going down together, and we're trying to help each other. Amy, you've been a great help with downtown and helping that organization find its way, and I just wanted to make that comment. With that, I'll pass it over to Nicole.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. I wanted to address the two questions that you posed to us. What would we like to hear about? One of the things that I think I'm still just struggling to understand a little bit is just to kind of conceptualize how the racial equity instrument is, how it works, how it's used. And so I think just a little walkthrough of like, this is what it would be like to be, somebody who's experiencing this instrument being applied or something like that might be helpful in growing my understanding of that. Having an understanding of how much budget is going toward these efforts and what kinds of things it's supporting, that would be helpful. I tend to think in terms of numbers. So for me, that would be useful. I just want to echo Tara's point, and I think Rachel brought this up as well, of thinking about, what's changed, what actions have been taken beyond conversation. And I don't mean to dismiss the value of conversation and training, just what's changing in response to all of these conversations. And then I think the other thing that would be helpful, if possible, it can sometimes be intimidating for, say, one person to come and talk to a council full of people. Is it possible, to make connections so that we can talk to some of the community connectors one-on-one or something like that? Also, just in thinking about how can staff best support us, you and the community connectors are building all these relationships and have them with groups in the community that may be outside of circles that we're usually running in. Having just connecting us with some of those folks in communities so that we can hear from them, I think would be really valuable. And not just hear from them, but really start building relationships that we don't already have in place, because no one of us has connections with all the communities in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are really great thoughts. I appreciate that. I'm super glad you're here.
We're all glad Nicole is here.
Yeah.
Turning it over to another person we're glad is here, Junie.
Yes.
Thank you, Bob. I just wanted to make a comment about something that Amy mentioned earlier. March 21st is International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. So maybe on that day, Boulder could also adopt it and reaffirm our racial equity plan. So that was one thought while you were talking that I thought, on that day, we can do the same thing. I wanted to go back to something that Bob said. And I just want to say first that I really appreciate this discussion we're having. Mm-hmm. Before we take action, sometimes it's a thought in the mind. It's something we have to have the conversation. But before we can have inclusion, we also have to have the people here, right? We can't have inclusion. I guess we can have the discussion, right? We can have the hypothetical discussion, but when it comes to action, the people have to be here for them to be included as well. So, and I take, I understand this idea, if you invite someone in your house is one thing, but including them in the process of that, whatever you're doing in that house is something completely different, but they have to be there as well. And I think my comment relates to the student. I saw as part of and on one of the slides, there was the student CU and the city working to create some type of a engagement to have students be part of the CD, whether students of color, as part of that process. And I think it can facilitate this idea of inclusion that Bob mentioned, that, you know, to have inclusion, you need to have those students here, or you need to have the people of color here, because if they can't live here, whether it's due to access of housing or because they're not part of this community, it's going to be very hard to have that inclusion. And it will remain this discussion, this hypothetical, theoretical discussion that we have on Tuesday night. So I think having that connection with between CU and the city to create that program or project where students are funneled into the city or to provide better opportunity to them, I think will facilitate that. And that is my comments for right now. Thank you.
Junie, I appreciate that. And you and I have discussed that previously, and I have been negligent in getting that on the calendar and pulling some folks together on that. So I appreciate you resurrecting that conversation.
Thank you, Junie. Matt.
Well, first I want to take my chance to thank for a presentation. It's nice, you know, certainly being new to council, to start to really dive deeply into this. And so it's actually quite refreshing to see this in detail. You know, one thing that comes to mind is for those of us that were just campaigning, that this conversation came up a lot about what are we doing? And not just the plan, but the actions. And so, you know, what Rachel and Nicole and others have been saying about really trying to suss out what those actions are and find those tangible specifics. One thing comes to mind is, how do we display that, not just for ourselves, but for the community? You know, are we 1% on our way? Are we 50% on our way? How does that move throughout the year? I'd love to be able to go to the city website on the racial equity plan and see some of these bars tick up as certain departments achieve more on their targeted plans to, you know, to sort of end those racial disparities. And so I think that's where we sort of get caught in that ether of spinning our wheels, because it doesn't, there's no visual, it doesn't seem like we can really see that tangible growth for ourselves as individuals, for ourselves as departments, a community, and a city government. So to me, that would be really helpful, because that shows the progress, which I think is vital, not just for us, but for our community members as a whole.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. Back to Rachel.
Just real quick, Matt made me think of something that we struggled a little bit on the last council, and that was, you know, information we're putting out to the public. And then Amy mentioned accountability earlier, and we had some glitches with, you know, posting who had completed the trainings. And so I don't know, Amy, if you can check in with people offline to make sure that everybody's comfortable with that going forward. But the previous council, as I recall, had committed to having that be public facing, like, you know, Bob Yates has completed training on blank date. And then we kind of walked that back. So I think it would be great if this council all committed to accountability, since this is, you know, one of the things that Amy highlighted as like top 3 in this work. You know, we as council members can say, yep, we've done the work, we're doing the work, we're modeling it.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel.
Amy, is that something you and Ryan could take on to maybe have one-on-one conversations with each of the 9 council members and see if they're all comfortable with that publication?
Absolutely happy to do that. And then also, I just want to offer it up to new and existing council members, if it's helpful to sit down and talk through one-on-one around some of this work. I'm happy to do that. Or if there's challenges or things that, you know, maybe you're not comfortable speaking about, I'm your person. And I like coffee.
That's all it'll cost you. It's just a cup of coffee.
No, I usually buy.
I don't see hands up. Is there any final comments? This has been a great discussion and an efficient discussion. Thank you for a great presentation and some great comments and observations. Any other comments or questions of staff before we break on this topic and come back in February or March? Amy and Ryan, did you get everything you needed from council members that you'd hoped to?
I believe so. As soon as we find out who signs up to be on our guiding coalition, I think that will be exciting news as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing where y'all land.
Give us about an hour and a half, and we'll have that answer for you.
I'll follow up.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Ryan.
My pleasure.
Take care.
Bye.
Much. Bye.
Chris, with that, we're going to turn it back to you for topic number 2, snow and ice.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Amy and Ryan. At this time, before I introduce Erica Vandenbrand, our Director of Transportation and Mobility, I did just want to acknowledge part of these next 2 presentations actually are both related to transportation. There's a set of managers across the organization who lead and support the hundreds of people that kind of support the operations side of the city. And it's an aspect that doesn't often come to a council meeting, but there are lots of folks that make sure we get clean drinking water every day, that the parks are mowed and maintained, that the streets are plowed of snow and signals are operational 24 hours a day, those sorts of things. And it's that group that really makes all of that happen. And today, Erica and her team are going to be here to present, and we're going to get a chance to meet a couple of those folks. So I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that as a part of these 2 items is something that we don't often get to bring to council agenda items. So with that, I'll turn it over to Erica to tee this one up.
Well, thank you very much. Again, I'm Erica Vandenbrand, the Director of Transportation and Mobility here at Boulder. And I'm going to be introducing Scott Schlecht, who is our Transportation Maintenance Manager here. And when we're talking about snow and ice control today, I think that Councilmember Yates has coined a phrase that it's actually snow moval, not snow removal or even controlling it. And I think there, that's actually quite accurate. I think one of the important things too, sort of, picking up the thread that Chris had, is that these are the folks that in the middle of the night, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, when all the snow and ice is getting moved from side to side, those are the folks that are out here helping keep our roadways and our pathways plowed and so forth. So with that, I will turn it over to Scott Schlecht, and please go gently with him because this is his very first time in front of council doing a presentation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Erica. I can't believe you outed me on my first time. I know the past members of council will know that, but the incoming folks may not have. But thank you very much. And Chris, thank you as well. Very, very nice words. And we do appreciate it. And all of our staff greatly appreciate your support and Erica's support and all the support all the way through. And we just do appreciate it. So with that, I will go ahead and share my screen and get the snow and ice slides going here. And actually, it's a little bit clunky on Teams here. And I think with that, everybody can see the slideshow. Perfect. So this is our snow and ice control.
Scott, you're in the presenter view, so you'll want to go to display settings and toggle those views.
Gotcha. So it did come across backwards again.
No worries.
Okay. Thank you very much, Brenda. So this is the snow and ice update for 2021 into 2022. And our overall program goals are to support the safe travel for all modes of transport during snow events, to operate efficiently, effectively, and safely while in alignment with the Transportation Master Plan and Boulder Police Department Master Plan goals, and to provide timely and informative communication around snow. Some of our areas that we maintain are city-owned assets, and of those we plow 52% of our streets. We do have 627 lane miles, so we plow around 330 of those lane miles. We plow 83% of our on-street bike lanes. So that's 164 miles of the 196 miles of on-street bike lanes that we do have. We do plow 100% of our 72 miles of multi-use paths. 38 of those miles are completed by transportation, and the remaining miles are plowed by our partners in Parks and Rec and CU. We maintain and shovel 204 crosswalks, turn islands, center medians, and curb ramp locations across the city. We also shovel 38 bus stops through a contractor, and then there are 54 bus stops that are enrolled in our Shovel a Stop program. The other bus stops are maintained by RTD. Some of our routes, I think this term gets thrown around and some people may not know what it is, but we have primary, secondary, conditional, and then on-street bike facilities. And to define those, our primary routes prioritize major streets. We have 5 primary routes. 4 of those use 2 trucks in tandem. Our secondary routes provide access to hospitals, schools, and RTD bus routes. We have 8 of those secondary routes. Conditional routes are plowed under specific weather conditions and are added to the secondary routes as conditions dictate. Our on-street bike lanes are addressed as part of the routes that they are attached to. Our off-street facilities include multi-use paths, right-of-way walks, crosswalks and curb ramps, and bus stops. Multi-use paths are broken into 2 routes plowed by transportation. Parks and Recreation and CU also plow portions of this network. Right-of-way walks consist of 1 route plowed by transportation. Some other city-owned locations are plowed by our contractor, but many of the sidewalks are shoveled by the adjacent property owners. The city contractor services the 38 bus stops across the city. And again, those 54 bus stops are enrolled in the Shovel a Stop program. During a snow event, we have 17 plow trucks for the 320 lane miles that we plow. We have 2 small trucks and a trackless machine for 38 miles of the path. We staff a total of 24 people for each shift, and each shift is 12 hours long. Our full staffing is essential to safety, ensuring that routes are timely cleared and that staff are not overly fatigued. Our utility maintenance staff continues to fill over half of our routes in order to cover our current program. This has impacts to the utilities maintenance group in completing their other regular maintenance and emergency repair activities. Some highlights from the 2020-2021 winter season include that we received a little less snow than the season before, but many small storms and missed forecasts kind of had a not very many shifts fewer than the year before. We do have to plan for the forecast and adjust as needed as the conditions change. We added live stream cameras that allow travelers to assess the conditions prior to embarking on their trip. We did a pre-season communication push that helped prepare the community and set expectations. Some of those expectations are that travel may be impacted during the height of storms, lanes may narrow during snow, and there will be some snow in the bike lanes during the storms. And then again, the Shovel a Stop program was successful and is already beginning to fill up for this year. Here's another summary. As you can see the numbers here, we had about 50 inches of snow less, 7 fewer events, and then 9 fewer shifts, and spent about $20,000 less. We do feel that our program was effective last year and plan to continue operations very similarly. We do remain open to feedback from the public and council to provide the best service we can for our customers. Some of those areas that we've identified for improvement are to create a response plan based on forecasted storm severity. This can be coupled with triggers for plowing residential streets if that's the direction we choose to go. And we will also be looking into increasing hand shovel areas and the frequency in which those are shoveled. And with that, does council have any questions about snow and ice control efforts the upcoming snow season.
Well, thanks, Scott. You did a great job considering this was your first time in front of council. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
We'll start with Rachel.
I agree. Welcome to presenting at council and great job. I just had one question about the volunteer for RTD program. I'm trying to understand, is that, or sorry, for bus stops, I think maybe you said RTD shovels some of its own bus stops, but like we wouldn't have people volunteer to shovel snow in the streets or at city owned sidewalks. So I'm just trying to understand who should be shoveling those areas and why are we requiring volunteer work for that? Because it is important. I agree that we have those shoveled. I just don't understand why it's not just automatically incorporated into what we're doing.
Yeah, so a lot of it's based off of ridership. And I'm just, I can get some of the ridership numbers, but I think we are shoveling everything that has 50 or more riders, either boarding or alighting per day. So they're really low use bus stops are the ones that we're enrolling in that shovel a stop program.
Gotcha. Well, I guess I would just, this is maybe beyond question now, because I'm just going to assert that, you know, if it's two people just using the bus stop, a car can get through snow, but there are a lot of situations where a person might not be able to. So I don't know that like a ridership cutoff makes sense for that. And I don't know, I guess I'd be curious, how much more money would it be for us to just incorporate those extra 30 into our routes, maybe at another update?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'll look into the numbers and can get back to you with that.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, Rachel. Matt, then Tara. Matt?
Thank you, Scott. I have to say, with the roads being clear well into December, it's working out quite well at this juncture. I wondered what the over-under are for the no snow comments, given we're talking about snow removal at this juncture. Two comments. One is, or a really question, why aren't hospitals considered a primary route? And where does that fit in sort of that prioritization during sort of snow events? I know it's second, but I'm just wondering why something such critical infrastructure isn't in that primary, make sure it's always got ubiquitous access.
Yeah, so to kind of answer that, we don't just plow the primary routes and then move on to the secondary routes. They're plowed together. So it's just the frequency in which we do plow those areas. Secondaries are plowed less frequent than the primaries. And kind of a good example of primaries, think foothills, Arapahoe, some of those major thoroughfare highways through the city. And those are our primary routes. And then some, secondary route, Greenbrier comes to mind as a secondary route. So kind of that difference there.
Okay, so it's sort of redundant in a sense because the hospital is on a primary route, so it sort of gets taken up anyway.
Correct.
Gotcha. My second question sort of has to do budgetarily. You know, when I looked at the year-end comparisons of snow, we sort of had 30% fewer snow events, but it only resulted in 1% savings in sort of budget. And so I'm kind of wondering where that balance is with regards to our infrastructure, but our personnel and how those balance out.
Yeah, so some of that is last year we did receive a lot of 1 or 2 inch storms, and we have to staff those. And oddly, looking back at the forecasts ahead of those storms, we had a lot that were calling for 3, 4, 5 inches that ended up being a half an inch or less. So that is that balancing act that we do and play with the staffing. Our priority is the safety of the streets, and we staff up for that when the forecast calls for it. And then we quickly revert back to either smaller staff for snow or no staff for snow if conditions call for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Matt. Tara.
Short, quick story. When I was going door to door, and I would ask people, when I was campaigning, and I would say, what's your most important issue? And an awful lot of people actually said snow and ice removal, which I thought was really interesting. And on my street, which is in the shade and on a slope, it wasn't until a year or two ago that our street was plowed. And I know before that, life was very treacherous here on my street. So I'm wondering, it seems like people do want snow and ice removal on their streets. What can we do to increase the amount of streets that get plowed? Or how do we decide if that's important? Who is it that decides? That's my first question. And my second question is, I'm hoping that you will answer Nicole's question from her hotline about enforcement. Because on one hand, when I look out the window and say, oh my gosh, I only have 24 hours to quickly, shovel. On the other hand, if we don't do that, that is not good for people that want to take walks on the street. So, I feel the guilt and I run out there. But somebody did mention in one of our emails that it doesn't get enforced that much. So there are some people that don't do anything and then everybody else suffers. You know what I'm saying? So what can be done should anything be done about enforcement? Can it not happen because we don't have the amount of employees that we used to? So I was just asking for some clarity on that. So those two questions.
So the code enforcement one, I can't speak to necessarily how they make their decisions because that's a different department that I don't manage. But I do have some information from them that they estimate over 50% of the sidewalk complaints or sidewalk contacts are complaint driven. And they do currently feel like they're adequately staffed. They did say that with a heavy storm that it becomes a little daunting for the staff that they do have, but they do try to get around. And I think their main goal is not to write tickets. Their main goal is to get sidewalks open for the safety of all the pedestrian traffic. And sometimes that does come with enforcement. And then for the question about what it takes to add routes, plow more streets, and that's really that's a decision that I think council plays into, kind of what direction we want to go with that. We do what we can with the resources, and we can provide the numbers to show what more resources are needed for adding certain things.
I'm going to call on myself before I call on Mark, and just to maybe underline the point that Scott just made. Up until about 2016 or 17, Scott can correct me on this. The city spent about $1 million or $1.1 million on snow removal or snow moval, as Erica corrected me. Snow moval. We don't actually remove snow; we just move it around and hope that it melts quickly. About 5 years ago, we had heard it from a number of community members who raised the same point that you did, Tara, that they would like to see snow moved or cleared more quickly on more streets. And so the city manager, Gene Brodigan, bumped the budget up. It went up from about $1.1 million to about, you saw the numbers, about $1.5 million. Some cities do more snow clearing faster. Some cities do less snow clearing than Boulder does. And this is purely economics. We could spend twice as much and get it done twice as fast, or do twice as many streets. We can spend 4 times as much. Some cities, I've heard from a few people this week that used to live in New Jersey, and apparently some towns in New Jersey spend gobs of money clearing their streets really, really fast. So it's community priorities. How much do people want to pay, or do they prioritize snow clearing services more than they do libraries or parks or the other things that the city does? And so as the snow flies later this week and through the winter, as council members, we're going to hear from lots of community members who say, can you plow my street, or can you plow my street faster, or what will it take? And the answer is money. It's really a prioritization decision, no different than any other prioritization decision that council makes. And I'm sure that staff will be happy to hear what budgetary decisions council would like to make, and they'll be responsive, whether it's more snow clearing or less snow clearing. And then finally, Scott, I had a question for you. There was a lot of good information there about about trucks and plows and so on and so forth. But I think you guys do some work even before the first snowflakes fall. I know that you guys watch the weather forecast really, really closely. Can you maybe touch a little bit on some of the applications you put on the streets even before you start plowing?
We do. So 2 seasons ago, we switched to a salt brine, which I think most of you may be familiar with. Previously, we had used a magnesium chloride based product, and we tried that as a pre-application when the roads were dry and snow was forecast, and it turned out quite disastrously and became very slick. And actually, I think we had some accidents around that. So with this salt brine, we're able to apply it to dry streets in advance of a snowstorm, and the water will evaporate from it. The salt will stay in the cracks and the crevices of the asphalt. And once that snow starts falling, it actually buys us a little bit of time. To Matt's earlier point about the budget reductions there weren't very significant, but we're seeing some additional with that delayed response because of that salt brine. So we do plan to continue that. One of the biggest challenges with that is early season storms, and a lot of what happened last winter was rain forecasted at the beginning of the storm, and it's not beneficial to put that salt brine down if they're calling for rain or some other type of moisture that isn't frozen in advance of that storm.
Thanks, Scott. We have Mark and then back to Matt.
Okay. Scott, thank you. That was a great first presentation. Appreciate it. Just a couple of quick questions. Does the salt brine have any positive impact on streets where you don't subsequently plow? If you put the salt brine down on Columbine, for instance, would that help in the event of a snowstorm, even if you're not going to plow the street? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that we can try it, and I'm open to trying that. I would like to do it on a very small test section that is maybe more not publicly accessible, because I'd be very concerned about a flash freeze over from that melting. The streets that we do visit regularly and reapply material and peel the snow off of, we don't get that refreeze. But it's very possible that you'll get that very slick layer of ice underneath with snow on top of it that becomes very treacherous.
As you move down the priority list, it's a 15-inch snowstorm. You're doing the primary and secondary streets first. You've plowed them by day 2. When you get to the priorities that you've listed, do you just stop? Or again, on day 3 or day 4 or day 5, is there a plow available to begin to plow some of those other streets that are not being addressed? Or again, is this just a budgetary issue?
So it is two-pronged, Mark, and we did during that March storm of 2021, we did plow every residential street. And interestingly enough, that storm had just the proper conditions, that it was warm asphalt underneath. We were able to peel all of the snow, cleared a pavement, and had very clear streets and drying streets very quickly in all of those residential areas. That is not a condition that we would see typically in the wintertime. I think most of us can remember that Thanksgiving storm of 2019 that we did end up plowing almost every residential street during that storm as well, but did not have the same success because it was a cold, packed down snow that our trucks just weren't able to attack.
And lastly, and I don't want to get into a big budgetary conversation, but how would you characterize both the number of plows available to you and their condition? How are we doing in terms of equipment, I guess, is really the overriding question.
That's a really great question. I think we are currently in a good position. We do get every one of our trucks and all of our snow equipment in through fleet at the beginning of each season. and get any defects taken care of at that time so that we avoid that downtime later. And then we do have a couple of quite aging backup trucks that are available if we do have a catastrophic failure in one truck.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Matt, then Lauren, then Junie.
Scott, yeah, you mentioned the salt brine. And so I wanted to sort of maybe ask sort of an environmental question with regards to, once that water evaporates, you sort of have the mineral deposit left of the salt. And so I'm wondering what we know about those potential environmental impacts, because I know historically a lot of communities moved away from salting due to not just corrosion for vehicles, but also issues with groundwater, certainly vegetation. You got leaf damage and dieback with any stuff that's sort of blown within, 10 to 15 feet of any roadways. And so I'm wondering where we look at those environmental impacts using the salt brine in that sense, and how we maybe deliberately or judiciously use it to minimize those environmental impacts.
Right. So application rates are a big one. We stay within the manufacturer's suggested application rates, and that's the manufacturer of the machine, because we do make that material in-house, and it's all automatic. So we do end up with the appropriate mixture of salt to water. One thing, it is more environmentally friendly than the previous magnesium chlorides. I had worked with a colleague that was much better at the scientific stuff than I am, but she had actually figured it out, and it is fewer chlorides per gallon in the salt brine than it is in the magnesium chloride.
Great. Lauren, then Junie.
Thanks, Bob. So I appreciated you guys talking a little bit about water quality, and Matt for having that discussion too. One of the things that in the memo it talked about was discretion based on sort of how it seemed like potentially dangerous the location is in terms of which kinds of snow melt and things we're using. I was wondering if we map maybe areas of concern in terms of water quality and ecology, where we might want to be more careful of where we're putting down some of these chemicals within our community, if that's something that has been considered in our plans.
The mapping I am not familiar with, but I will check into that, and I will get back to you on that one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Junie.
Thanks, Bob. I have a question, and I think it may have been answered already, because you mentioned in 2021 that every residential street was plowed. And I wonder, when that happened, was there any type of community engagement? Because my understanding is that some communities, and tell me if I'm wrong, for some streets, some neighbors don't want the city to plow because their cars get blocked in with the snow. So I'm wondering, what are some of the mitigations that you're using, or does the city do any type of engagement to know where to plow and where not to plow, or if not?
So yeah, that is correct. We did during the March storm, and it was just the one storm. We did plow every residential street, and we were very cautious with that because we have received feedback previously that even on our some of our main or secondary routes, folks don't like the windrows of snow that we build. So we were very cognizant of that while we were doing it. We stayed to a very narrow path down the middle of the street and did not pick on one side or the other. And if we did build our plows up with snow that we needed to deposit somewhere, we tried to deposit it either in between driveways or places that weren't parked with cars. So to answer it really shortly, we were very cautious of that because we have heard that feedback as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Junie. Nicole.
Thank you. And Scott, thanks for this great presentation. It's really helpful in understanding this a little bit better. I just have one question. Just wanted to follow up a little bit more on the conditional routes and just ask if you could explain a little bit more what those are. So how are they determined? And then under what conditions are they plowed?
Sure. Conditional routes are determined based on slope and shade. So some of the more sloped areas, Greenbrier comes to mind again. There's one off street there that if you don't get stopped coming down the hill, you'll end up down in the lake. So that is one that comes directly to mind. So it is based on safety, and then we also do get into some of the critical bike connector routes as well for the green streets.
Thank you.
Tara.
Last question for me is, I'm thinking about, Lauren, I can't remember. Oh, no, Junie, who mentioned the cars being stuck in the plow, in the light of the plow. And I was wondering, because I think one year it took my husband hours to get his car out, and we actually had to find community members to help us. We couldn't do it ourselves. So I'm wondering if there is some sort of a way that maybe Brenda can think of for the community, maybe older people that cannot get their car out of once it was plowed, if there was a number of people could call, or if there's something we can do within the neighborhoods to help us poor, older, weak people. I'm sure there's plenty of people like us. If anybody has thought of that idea, or is it something that's possible?
So there is a volunteer program that isn't run by the city. It's Snowbusters. And folks can go to the website and sign up, and they will be paired with volunteers to shovel their driveways or dig out their cars and sidewalks and whatnot.
Can you spell that, please?
SNOWBUSTERS.
And the organization that runs Snowbusters in the area is called Cultivate. It's cultivate.ngo. But if you type in just Snowbusters, it pops right up. And it is, as Scott says, we really have two volunteer programs, Snowbusters and then the Shovel a Stop program. Scott, I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to ask you a final question from myself. I know that this fall we invited school children to name our 17 snowplows. And my question to you is, and you announced winners, what's your favorite name?
I'm pretty partial to Darth Blader, but I do like Plowser as well.
Plowser and Darth Blader. Yeah. And will those names be on the plows themselves?
Those names will be on the plows themselves. We did just display those at the Parade of Lights in Boulder last weekend. So we do have all the names in stock, and we are deploying those on each of those trucks.
Good. Well, when it snows at the end of the week, we'll all be watching for those plows up and down our streets. Looks like we have no more questions. So Scott, great inaugural presentation to Boulder City Council. You answered all of our questions, and you're welcome back anytime.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Great. Folks, just a quick time check. We are 12 minutes ahead of the schedule that the Council Agenda Committee laid out for us. So let's keep moving here. I'm going to turn it back over to Chris and Erica for a second transportation presentation.
Great, thank you. And I'll turn it straight to Erica.
Thank you very much. So this next presentation about, our Vision Zero and our safety report, I just wanted to remind, Council that, Vision Zero and the community safety has been a key priority, on the Council, work program and work agenda. And following, I guess the habit, and then also, the desire of Council to have data-driven decision-making. For you today, we have the data to help with subsequent decision-making. So this first part over here is really all about the data and being able to share it with you to be transparent. And then we have a part two coming later on, which is the action plan of what we would do with the data. So I just wanted to preface, this presentation with that. I also would like to introduce Devin Jocelyn, who is our principal traffic engineer. He's the manager for our traffic operations side. And he too is on his maiden voyage with council today. So, we really appreciate you being so kind to the newbies on the team. And so with that, take it away, Devin.
Thank you, Erica. I appreciate the introduction. It was fun to tell my kids, hey guys, I'm going to go on TV in just a minute. I need you to keep it down. So if you do hear any noises in the background, they're doing their best. Let me share my screen. Oh, sorry, just a moment. There we go. Are you able to see my screen now correctly? All right. Well, good evening, council members. As Erica said, my name is Devin Jocelyn. I'm the principal traffic engineer for the city of Boulder. And I'm very pleased to be here tonight to present to you on our progress updating the Safe Streets report. Before I begin, I do want to acknowledge the work of our project team and really thank them for all their efforts in getting us to this point tonight. I truly appreciate the collaboration across departments to gather, review, and analyze crash data, all with the goal of improving travel safety in Boulder. This presentation, as Erica said, will provide a high-level overview of the Safe Streets report update. It should last about 15 minutes, then we'll have time for discussion following. I have four main things to cover tonight, and as I said, I do want to allow plenty of time for discussion with you, as I know there is a lot of information to digest in both this presentation and the materials in your packet. Really, I'm hoping to give you just a high-level sense of what is in the report, how we prepared it, some of the key things to look out for within it, brief you on what we heard from TAB when we went to them in November, and then get you prepared for the next steps and move into our discussion. I want to begin with a brief primer of the concept of Vision Zero. Vision Zero employs both a location-specific and system-wide approach that is targeted, responsive, and proactive through a transformative set of actions that prioritizes travel safety for everyone. Vision Zero includes a holistic 4E's approach to eliminate severe crashes, as well as reduce other types of crashes. Of note, severe crashes are those that involve a fatality or incapacitating injury. Our Vision Zero approach also focuses on the community's perception of travel safety and comfort, with the idea that no one should be discouraged from traveling by any mode because of fears about safety. Vision Zero is an overarching commitment to prioritizing travel safety in our projects, programs, and decision-making. There are 5 Vision Zero objectives, and I know by now you've probably had time to read them, but I do think they are worth reading aloud. Number 1, eliminate crashes resulting in serious injuries and fatalities. Number 2, reduce other types of crashes. Number 3, improve travel comfort and security. Number 4, enhance awareness of and community engagement with Vision Zero. And number 5, improve data and be transparent. So with that in mind, I'd like to provide a brief definition and summary of what the Safe Streets report is. The City of Boulder is certainly committed to creating and maintaining a safe transportation system through capital improvements, ongoing maintenance, traffic control, education, targeted enforcement, and evaluation. Key concerns such as speeding, impaired or distracted drivers, and conflicts among vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists all challenge our national reputation as a walkable, bikeable, and livable city. The Safe Streets report is the summary of quantitative data on crashes that have occurred within a specific time frame within the city of Boulder. In the case of the current report update, we are focusing on crash data for the period between 2018 through 2020. As Erica alluded, the Safe Streets report really tells us what happened with respect to crash data and trends. The report focuses on crash data and tells us how the transportation system has been performing from a Vision Zero perspective. With that information, that will be used to to develop the corresponding Vision Zero action plan, which will be updated in 2022. The Vision Zero action plan outlines the what are we going to do about the crashes and will detail specific action items that will be conducted to address the trends and issues documented in the Safe Streets report. It's really in the Vision Zero action plan where we get into project identification and prioritization, but it's the Safe Streets report that contains the foundational data to inform the action plan. In addition, the Safe Streets report informs our other city transportation plans, such as the design and construction standards, pedestrian crossing treatment installation guidelines, traffic signal timing practices, the low stress walk and bike network plan, as well as the curbside management plan, which is currently in progress. This timeline gives the brief history of the Safe Streets report to date. Really, there have been 4 editions of it so far. It began in 2009. The first report was published in 2012 and analyzed data from 2009 through 2011. Then in 2014, the city adopted Vision Zero within the Transportation Master Plan. And subsequent to that, we've done updates to the report ever since. And this 4th edition report will contain a snapshot of the most recent crash trends. It will identify the top areas of concern, as well as compare current trends to prior trends. We also include a discussion about the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on crash trends, and we summarize engineering, education, and enforcement efforts that were completed within the analysis period. I want to walk briefly through the methodology that we use to prepare the report. The methodology that we use to create the report is very thorough, and it consists of compiling and analyzing all crash reports for the 3-year analysis period. The analysis is done to identify both high-level crash trends, as well as identify what types of crashes are happening where within the city and to whom. The analysis is conducted to identify areas of concern and gauge progress at addressing prior issues through both engineering, education, and enforcement efforts. With respect to the overall methodology, we kept it consistent with prior reports. All crash records were queried to only include police-reported crashes from the crash database, and the updated report will really have a similar look and feel to the prior version that analyzed data from 2015 through 2017. With respect to pedestrian and bicycle crashes, we give those some special attention. And what we do with those is we read through every police officer narrative of those crashes to gain as much information about them as possible. Then we use a tool that's called the Pedestrian and Bicycle Crash Analysis Tool to really take a deep dive and help us to quantify specific crash trends related to bicycles and pedestrians. This time around, we did decide to remove private property crashes from the analysis, and there were 3 main reasons for that. One was just to align with industry standards for Vision Zero reporting. Number 2 is that we really don't have any jurisdiction to mitigate crashes on private property. And number 3 is that the reports of crashes on private property often lack sufficient detail for us to tell what happened. With respect to the COVID-19 pandemic, we wanted to look at that and see how the reduction in crashes correlated to changes in vehicle miles traveled, as well as changes in bicycle volumes within the city. So we have some comparisons in the report that look at that. And again, I want to highlight that we're pulling out the action plan update as a separate work task in 2022. And the action plan will really help us to identify and recommend crash countermeasures to really help us move the needle toward Vision Zero. Now I want to share with you briefly some of the key findings from the crash data analysis. And this infographic, I think, does a nice job of putting everything on one page. And as I go through them, I'll kind of go top to bottom, left to right. So you can see there that really total crashes per year have been trending down since 2016. With respect to severe crashes, those have remained steady since 2016, ranging between about 55 and 60 a year, except for 2020, which of course was impacted by the pandemic and had 38 severe crashes. In 2020, there was a 44% reduction in total crashes and a 31% reduction in severe crashes compared to 2019. And note that the vehicle miles traveled in 2020 decreased about 29%. So we did see a little bit greater decrease in crashes compared to the overall decrease in travel within the city. Down toward the bottom, we have our 5 areas of concern, and these are largely unchanged since the prior report. Crashes involving bicyclists, pedestrians, people making left turns, speeding, and older drivers, those that are 65 and older, have a much higher percentage of severe crashes compared to the percentage of total crashes. So really these 5 are the ones that we pay the most attention to in developing our mitigation measures because they'll yield the most positive results working toward Vision Zero. And I do want to point out at the very bottom there that most of our severe crashes from 2018 through 2020 occurred on our principal arterial and minor arterial roadways. 65% of our severe crashes occurred on those roadways, although they account for only about 16% of our total centerline miles within the city. Next, I want to walk you through just a little bit of one section and one area of concern that's contained within the updated report. When we met with Transportation Advisory Board in November, we went through each of those 5 areas of concern in detail. But tonight, I just want to walk you through one area of concern, and that's crashes involving people making left turns. And I'm doing that to give you a sense of how the report itself is organized. We plan to come to you again early next year for your feedback on the final report. And what you'll see within the report is all the detail for each area of concern. In general, the report is organized to provide key findings and trends related to each area of concern, a map that shows the location of crashes that correspond to each area of concern, and the key approaches that we've taken to reduce crashes, and any results related to evaluation of prior action taken in an attempt to reduce crashes within those areas. And specifically to left turn crashes, what we see is that left turn crashes are an area of concern because they were 34% of our total severe crashes, but only account for 16% of all crashes within the city. So in this way, severe crashes are overrepresented. And what we saw was that there were 51 severe left turn crashes between 2018 and 2020. And of those, the vast majority occurred with people making permitted left turns. And of the permitted left turns, half were at signalized intersections and half were at unsignalized intersections or driveways. What we did see was a slight increase in the number of left turn crashes occurring at unsignalized driveways in this most recent 3-year period compared to the prior 3-year period. But we did see a slight decrease. We saw 5 fewer left turn crashes at signalized intersections within this most recent 3-year period. And I think what we find is that a lot of the decrease in severe left turn crashes at signalized intersections can be attributed to left turn phasing changes that we've made. Since the prior Safe Streets report, we've made left turn phasing changes at 48 intersections, 48 intersection approaches at a total of 25 intersections. And what we find is that those phasing changes virtually eliminate left turn crashes, really an 87% reduction overall in total crashes per year. And we're very fortunate that we've been able to leverage the prior versions of the Safe Streets report, and we plan to do the same with this version to obtain grant funding to help us continue this work to improve our signal system. And you can see on the slide some of the highlights here. We've really been awarded over $3 million in grant funds to help us continue this work to upgrade our signal system. And there's a lot planned in the way of some technology improvements in terms of adding additional closed circuit television cameras, as well as improved detection at intersections that will give us more insight into what's happening at them. And then we also plan to have reconstruct a number of signals to allow us to implement flashing yellow arrow more broadly throughout the city. And then there's, of course, a section within the report that we want to reflect back on things we've done to date in the areas of engineering, education, and enforcement. So you will see discussion within the report highlighting what we've done in each of these areas and speaking where we can to the effectiveness of various treatments in these areas. I want to tell you briefly about what we heard from TAB. Again, we went to them last month and got their feedback on the crash analysis to date. And really the key themes are listed here on this slide. Really, TAB recognizes that there is, it takes money to make these changes. And so we need to ensure that we're working as best as we can to obtain the funding we need to address the key issues. And then really just keeping a focus on the big picture and the most meaningful issues to direct staff appropriately to address them. And then we need to recognize that 2020 is, of course, unique and has been challenging for all of us during this pandemic. And so things that we saw in terms of the analysis aren't necessarily reflective of longer term trends within the city. And then, of course, we want to complete that Vision Zero action plan update, and certainly hoping for your and TAB support to do that and work through that next year. And I'm sorry, just to clarify, TAB stands for our Transportation Advisory Board. And then in terms of next steps, this is the timeline for that. You can see we're here tonight at this study session to present this high-level overview, and then we'll have the draft report ready in January, and we plan to share that with the Transportation Advisory Board and make that available as well for members of the community to review. We do plan to go to the Transportation Advisory Board at their January meeting to brief them and get feedback on the report. And then we're hoping to get back on the City Council agenda early next year, aiming for tentatively in February to come back to you and let you, once you've had a chance to digest that report in more detail, provide us with additional feedback on it so we can work to finalize that early in the year and begin to transition into our action plan update. And with that, there are two questions here. Does council have any questions related to the analysis methodology or key findings? And question number two is, does council have any questions on what will be in the updated Safe Streets report?
Well, thanks, Devin. That was a great first ever, just like Scott. So you're always welcome to come back as well. I hope your kids are proud of you. I want to emphasize before we get into answering Devin's questions, this is not the Safe Streets report. This is, we could spend a lot of time, and we will spend a lot of time drilling into various data and also recommendations. And so we're not going to do that tonight. Devin kind of gave us a sneak preview just on the left-hand turn thing, but that's just one small element of what's going to be a very, very comprehensive report. It's going to be a very long report. It'll be a long session that night. So we're not going to drill into anything substantive. And so the questions that I think staff is looking for tonight is they want to make sure that we're comfortable with the methodology, the content of the report, the data that they're being collecting. So let's focus. This is really a process discussion on the eve of the finalization of the report for presentation to TAB in January, and then ultimately to council in February. So let's focus on process and on the types of things that staff is putting in the report as they kind of wrap it up and present it to TAB in the next few weeks. So with that, we'll go to Aaron, then Rachel, then Nicole.
Devin, thanks so much for that presentation. It was very illuminating. Very glad to have you here tonight. Looking forward to working together more in the future. I guess I'll just have a question / comment. The data on the crashes on left turns was illuminating and kind of scary, and also good to hear that that's an area of focus for us, and that we're working on reducing those kinds of crashes really actively. So will we get a pretty thorough deep dive analysis of that issue and all those numbers and the kinds of turns and what the opportunities are for maybe reducing some of those crashes in the Safe Street report?
Yes, I would say you will. There's a lot more detail that's provided as far as the specific locations where we have already implemented those left turn phasing changes and saw those positive results. And then there's a lot that's contained within our traffic signal timing practices. That's really the overarching guiding document that we use to make left turn phasing determinations within the city. But there's a lot that's coming on board within the traffic engineering community as far as technological advancements that will probably allow us to be a little more flexible and adaptive to this issue. There are things that we've already got going at a few intersections. 30th and Walnut comes to mind, where there's a left turn phasing that's called pedestrian protect. And basically when a pedestrian pushes the button, it only serves the red, yellow, green arrow, the protected left turn, and does not allow left turns to occur when a pedestrian is crossing. But if there's not a pedestrian call, it may serve the protected and permitted left turn phasing. So there are options out there, and I think there's a lot that council can weigh in on as far as how we move forward with this type of treatment.
Great, that's good to hear. I look forward to seeing those in-depth numbers and the analysis in the final report. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Rachel, then Nicole, then Matt.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks, Devin. Congratulations on a successful first presentation. Nice work. And I did email this question to some staff members ahead of time, but not on hotline. And Bob, you're going to be annoyed with the background I give, but it's going to build to the limited questions that you did request. So in the top 4 severe crash locations, Baseline and Mohawk is on that list. And in January 2020, which is now 23 months ago, so almost 2 years ago, there was a really heinous pedestrian fatality there of an 85-year-old man. And this is in my neighborhood, and I wrote a hotline at the time. And then I met with, I believe it was Carlos Hernandez and Bill Cowron. They were both previous transportation directors. And we talked about some significant concerns, and not just related to that fatality, but the intersection itself requires people to cross a full 7 lanes. 2 have been converted into bike lanes, but the distance across is 7 lanes. And it's right at the corner of a rehab facility and right near a retirement center. So you've got a lot of 65+-year-olds, which we're seeing are overrepresented in the severe fatality or severe crashes. And so it's a lot of people who need extra time crossing, and it's 7 lanes. And I was told back in April of 2020, after that fatality, that it was slated for improvements sometime in 2023. And I think that it's limited to signal enhancements. So it's already been about 2 years since that fatality and since I met with Carlos and Bill, and it's on this top 4 severe crash reports. And again, all that it's slated for is signal enhancements. It's got a higher than average number of vulnerable users. So I guess the data is great, but it feels like at least in this instance, it has not led to quick action, even though we have vulnerable users and the data shows that it's a need. So my question on the Safe Streets report is, what treatments are planned for those 4 severe crash locations? And why did we pick those treatments? Like, if we're just getting signal enhancements, it's still going to be 7 lanes. Right now it's got the permitted or permissive left turn lane there. But it doesn't feel like the best outcome to wait 4 years for just signal enhancements. And also just why is it taking that long, especially in a place that is top 4 and has vulnerable users? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that context. And it is hard to hear that, certainly. I will say that things like this do obviously take money. And one route we.
Your microphone went on mute, Devin.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I think we can hear you, Devin.
Okay, are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
It shows I'm unmuted, so thank you. Improvements like that certainly do take money, and the route we chose to go with that particular intersection and some of these other ones was to apply for Highway Safety Improvement Program funding. And we were successful in procuring that funding. However, there are some administrative processes in getting that money flowing. And I think that's where we're held up now, is waiting on a notice to proceed, really, for the grant to allow us to get started and move forward with those improvements. In the interim, we did, as part of the Vision Zero Innovation Program, install what's called a hardened center line at that intersection on the east leg. And what that device does is it changes the turning path of left turning vehicles. And it really forces motorists to make an honest turn, a 90-degree turn, and gets them more focused on a slower turning speed, as well as, looking more closely at the crosswalk for any pedestrians who may be crossing. And so far, we've not heard any concerns from the community about putting that particular device out. We've also not really gotten any feedback about one way or the other if it's making people more comfortable, just being honest there. But we are planning, as you said, to change and reconstruct the signal. I think that's another limitation, is the signals can only take certain loads, and the loading of the signal heads on the mast arm is a consideration that we have to weigh when we want to make certain improvements. And a limitation there was that due to the age of the mast arm and condition of the poles, we really have to change those poles and arms out entirely for what seems like a simple swap of a signal head to change the left facing. But I do want to point out that there were some other interim improvements that were made to allow people to have more time to cross, as well as giving them a pedestrian head start. And those changes were made, more recently following that severe crash that you mentioned.
Thanks for that update. So again, I'll just reiterate, I think for all 4 of the severe crash identified locations and intersections, it would be helpful to know what treatments are planned and how we got there, and why it's taking years to get to the final treatments. So thank you.
Sure. Okay.
And Devin, I think one of the things I'm hearing in that exchange between you and Rachel is also if there are limitations or blockades and you doing what you think you need to do, whether they're policy decisions, if they're financial and budgetary, if there are things that are preventing you from doing what you feel you need to do, I think we're looking for that in the report, or at least in your presentation of the report, so that if we can take action either ourselves or with other governmental aid and entities, we'd love to know that. So you can rely on us to do some of your heavy lifting for you. So please do include that.
Thank you for that.
Nicole, then Matt.
Thanks, Devin. I appreciate your presentation. And I just, I wanted to say I have no questions on the methodology. So thank you for explaining that. As far as your question about what we'd like to see in the report, I would really love to just hear your thinking on why severe crashes aren't really going down. Total crashes seem to be, but not the severe. And so just trying to dig into that a little bit more. I'm curious about, in addition to left-hand turns, there were, I think, 4 other things you mentioned that lead to a large number of severe crashes. And I would be curious just to know what changes were made, for example, to decrease walking and biking severe crashes, and how effective those changes have been, kind of like just like for the left-hand turns. And then to Rachel and Bob's points, I would love to encourage you all to be bold in the potential solutions that you are putting forth. And when I say that, what I mean is if we wanted to get to 0 severe crashes in 2024, what would we do in 2022 and 2023 to make that happen? don't worry. I mean, it may be good even just to have a matrix kind of cost by, effectiveness or impact or something like that. But, Paris just dropped their speed limit to 20 miles per hour, right, within the city. If we doubled the miles of protected bike lanes that we have, I mean, what are just, the really bold things we could do? I just want to encourage you to think about that, because it's really striking to me how when the miles traveled decreased in 2020, severe crashes decreased substantially as well. And so just thinking about that, anyway, that I'm looking for boldness. It's the short version.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Matt, then Tara.
Oh, Nicole, you stole just a good chunk of where I was going, but awesome. I'm glad you said that. I'll just reiterate boldness. That was kind of what I was hoping for as well. And I'd love to see that. I'll just maybe pull on the protected bike lanes a little bit and just say that I hope that this report touches on the efficacy and the data that shows where and the usefulness of protected bike lanes, where it's keeping us safe, and what's the plan to sort of do that. And to maybe follow up on that boldness is, how do we fully decouple vehicles and our bikes and other modes of transit? We focus on the tweaking those interactions, but the decoupling to me seems the holy grail of really reaching that vision zero and providing that thoughtless, mindless, safe environment for bikes and other modes of transit. So in any event, that's what I'd love to see in the report, is that really forward-thinking opportunity for us to then, to Bob's point, figure out those policies, those leveraging of resources to really meet that vision and meet some of that boldness. So that's what I'd hope to see in the report as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tara.
Yeah, going off of what Nicole said, what I would like to see and know in the report is what isn't working. And so if something isn't working and we're still spending money on it, how can we take that money and use it for what does work, instead of just keep doing what doesn't work? And I'm not saying that anything does or doesn't work, for sure not. And by the way, Devin, thanks for spending all that time with me today. I just want you to know, Devin and I talked on the phone because I wanted him to explain to me what the white things were, which he told me were, what did you call them, Devin? White poles?
Delineators.
Delineators, yes. So thank you for explaining that. I'm now the council expert in those white delineators. If you have any questions, you can feel free to call me. But so that is what I would like to personally see, just because it seems like money is an issue, and it would be great if we could use money for where it's best to be used.
Thank you. And I do want to point out to that point that we are coming around to a cycle where some of the countermeasures we've deployed years ago are now coming up for replacement and maintenance, such as our first installation of green conflict markings. We're now at the point where we need to, reinstall and refresh those. So that's another consideration that we face, as well as are they working and should we refresh them if not?
Thanks, Devin. Thanks, Tara. Warren, what would you like to see in the report?
I'd love to see, so I've heard other cities are doing things like using the video feeds and computer algorithms to sort of spot close calls and to assess close calls at intersections. And I'd love to know if that's something like that we should be looking at, in terms of if some of these intersections are difficult to assess, how to make them have zero fatalities, or, just kind of thinking about new technology and how that fits it into our overall long-term plan for trying to make these streets safer, faster.
I think this is something transportation operations is certainly open to. And I think we've got a great opportunity with that DRCOG grant that I mentioned to move us in the right direction. Right now, a lot of our signals operate with wireless radio communication. And what that DRCOG grant is doing is building out a fiber optic network within the city that our signals will be, tied into. And so that's kind of this step one, right, is getting the foundational basis for allowing those technological advancements to occur. And I think through that grant, within the next year or two, we'll have that good backbone laid. We're also adding a number, as I mentioned, of those closed circuit television cameras, about 60 of them at different intersections. So we will get a lot more eyes on the road that way. And then I know there are technologies out there that can layer on top of your existing video feeds and provide that kind of artificial intelligence to help you make decisions and recognize things that a person can't sit there and watch 24/7, but a computer can tell you if things are happening that you need to be alerted to. So I think that is certainly something we're keeping an eye on as technology advances.
Thanks.
Thanks, Lauren. Junie, what's your input?
Thanks, Bob. I just have a quick question and comment. Something I don't see a lot around Boulder, at least maybe the areas that I frequent, is I don't know what it's called, is when you're driving, for instance, there's like a sign that says, let's say 30, and if you're driving too fast, it's flashing that you're going over. And I don't see a lot of that around Boulder. And I'm thinking, I've been driving every day to another city to go to work. And I see a lot of these signs. And sometimes, I'm driving 35 over the speed limit. And as soon as I see that flashing sign, I actually slow down. I do. And I think probably a lot of people do the same as well. So I'm wondering how, are we using these type of signs around Boulder and around areas that seems to be accident prone for some reason? And, is that a form of mitigation that we're using here in this community?
Yes, it is. We do have a handful of those installations, but probably not that many, as you've noticed. They are kind of few and far between within the city, and those are called radar speed feedback signs. However, I will mention that we were successful this year in obtaining a grant that will be focused on how we set speed limits and how we sign speed limits within the city. And we'll be starting that work mid next year. And I think that's certainly one tool that we can consider as we look to how we both set and sign speed limits within the city, and if that's an appropriate tool to deploy more broadly in certain circumstances.
Thank you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Junie. Mark, you're next.
Okay, Devin, thank you for that great presentation. Appreciate it. When you look at the data, do you look at causality as well as just the raw data? There are 20. You have an intersection with 20 severe crashes. If 20 of those are coming from cars improperly turning left, that suggests one type of mitigation. And if for whatever reason it's 20 bikes running a red light and turning into the cars, that might suggest a different type of remediation. Do you do that analysis?
Yes, we do. Not necessarily as part of this Safe Streets report, but certainly through the Vision Zero action plan, we will take a deeper dive to look more closely at the causality and identify those specific trends that might be causing the crashes to occur at a location.
Okay. And when you, further to Nicole's comment, will you be taking a broad look at sort of our ordinance structure, speed limits, other penalties? Should they be lowered? Should they be raised? Are you going to take a broad view on that or not?
I think that's certainly open for consideration. And historically, what we've done is we've tried to weave in not only engineering tools, but also those that include education campaigns, as well as enforcement measures. And I would kind of categorize penalties and fines as one arm of enforcement. And I certainly think that that is something that we can incorporate as a team into the next action plan.
And lastly, as I'm sure some of these suggestions are going to entail infrastructure expenditures, will you be costing that out for us to give us at least an estimate of what we're looking at?
That was our intent with this go around with the action plan. And that's part of the reason we wanted a little more time next year to complete it, is we do want to cost out some of these things and determine, as was stated, maybe what's a low, medium, high option for ways to move forward.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think this was a great presentation, and looking forward to the full report. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think we have any other hands up. Devin, I just had one quick question on the report. I know that we adopted 20 is plenty only about a year ago. Is it too soon to include in your report any data around observations, even if they're anecdotal, are on 20 is plenty?
We are treating that as a separate evaluation that's underway at the moment, and we're planning to wrap that up in February and come to you in March with that results of that evaluation.
Okay, that's great. As we wrap up here, I just want to make an observation. Aaron will recall that shortly before he and I joined council in 2015, council was saying to the transportation staff, "Why are you being so bold?" And here we are in 2021 saying to transportation staff, "Please be bold." So I think that we've come a long, long ways in that intervening 6 years. And obviously you're hearing a lot of permission from council to be bold, to tell us what we need to do to protect our community. So thank you so much, Devin.
Thank you.
You made that statement, Bob, without using the F word.
I wasn't going to use the F word. We all know what I was talking about, though. So with that, we are now running 15 minutes ahead of schedule, which is great. We are moving to our final chapter of the night, and that is the opportunity once a year for council members to work with each other to come up with our respective assignments to boards and commissions. And Taylor, I think you're going to lead us on that. Is that right?
Hey, Bob, I am here today, but actually Chris is going to be taking point in terms of answering any questions and providing any needed input. But I will be running these slides here and typing in folks' names as they volunteer to be part of these groups.
Great. You'll be the scrivener. And Chris, what role will you play?
Taylor and I, as she said, are going to kind of tag team this. So if, as you go through the list, if there are any council questions or if we as staff have any questions, I'll jump in. But other than that, this is really a conversation for all of you.
Well, great. Let me just make a couple of observations. First of all, new council members will remember that back on November 9th, after you were elected, but before you were sworn in, we had the outgoing council members and those that were carrying over walk through each of these boards and committee assignments to help give you a preview of what the level of commitment was, what kind of work was happening in each one of them. So hopefully that was of help to you. I think that may have been the first time we've done that. And if you think we should keep doing that in subsequent years, we will. The way this is going to work is Taylor and Chris are going to walk us through. There's about 24 of these assignments, maybe a little bit more. And we're just going to walk through in order. And if it's something that you would like to volunteer for, let's not do a hand raise because that's a little awkward. I'm just going to ask everyone just to open up their mics. And if it's something that you want to do, just speak up and say, I'd like to do that. And if it's not something you want to do, then just stay quiet. And that's true whether if you're a continuing council member, if you're already doing something and you want to keep doing it, please re-volunteer. If you are somebody who's on a committee assignment, for example, I'm going to speak for Junie. Junie and I are both on the Police Master Plan Committee, but I think we both have said that we would be happy to yield our positions on that. So we can announce that and just speak up. For some of these committee assignments, we are going to have exactly the right number of people. Some of them we call for one and some call for two, and we're going to have the right number, and that's going to be great. And we're just going to put that one to bed. A few of them, we may hear crickets where no one is particularly interested. We'll just move on and we'll circle back. Ultimately, we do need to fill up all these spots. And then for a handful, probably 3 or 4 or 5, we'll probably end up oversubscribed. That is, we'll have too many people who want to volunteer for that thing, and that's okay too. So if just because you hear 1 or 2 people volunteer for something doesn't mean that that's locked out. Please speak up if it's something you want to do. And then what we'll do is we'll go through everything. We'll take a giant step back and we'll look to see what we're oversubscribed on. If we can work some of that out tonight, let's say there's a spot where we need 2 council members and 4 apply for it. Maybe there's 1 or 2 people say, you know, it's not all that important to me. I'll back off on that one. So we might be able to resolve a few of these tonight. I guarantee you there's a few that we won't be able to resolve tonight, and that's okay. So at the end of the night, Taylor and Chris will help us identify those that are still oversubscribed. And then what we have done traditionally is we have asked the people who are volunteering for that oversubscribed thing to take it offline over the next few days and talk amongst yourselves and see if you can come up with a compromise. Sometimes that compromise is, yeah, that one really wasn't important to me, or I'll do this one if you want to do that one. Or how about you do it for the first year and I'll do it for the second year. So whatever compromises you work out. If we end up with only 2 or 3 of those types of oversubscribed things, I think it would be fine for one of the people who are doing the working out to do a hotline post and just let the rest of council and the world know what you've all agreed. If we end up with a lot, and we'll assess this at the end of the night, that might be a little bit cumbersome, and we might just use Aaron as our point person. Either way, I think it would be helpful for us all to get this all sorted out by the end of the week, because we are scheduled to vote on these assignments. We're not going to make decisions tonight. We are scheduled to vote on these assignments next Tuesday. And it's kind of important that we do, because some of these committees are, quite frankly, rudderless or lack an occupant right now, because we had some council colleagues leave us a few weeks ago. And so some things have the potential to slip through the cracks. So I think it's important that we get this done before the holiday break. And so please, in good faith, work things out, and then let's plan to vote on these assignments. The final process suggestion I'm going to make is, if something is something that you really, really want to do, it's your first choice, please say that. Say, you know what, there's 4 or 5 things I like to do, and I'd like to do any of them. I'm kind of agnostic about a few. I'm willing to do them. But this one thing is the thing I really want to do, because everyone has a first choice. And so please do express your first choice. That way you can signal to your colleagues that that's something that's super important to you. Any other process suggestions? Aaron, you've done this a lot of times with me. Anything else you think would be helpful?
I think you covered it, Bob. I think we'll move through it.
Great, let's just do it.
Wait.
Yeah, we have a couple hands up.
Okay, we got some questions. Okay, go ahead. Jump in.
It would be really helpful if for each of these committees, you would say at the beginning, this is going to be during the week from 4 hours, twice a month, because some of us work full time, and I think it would be, or part-time even, and I think it would be helpful to know that, even though I looked all over for this information and I couldn't find it anywhere. Exactly. It's on Thursdays. It's from 8 to 12. It's 2 times a month, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be super helpful for me.
Okay, we tried to do that on the 9th of November. Let's, rather than doing that for each one of these things, let me just say that if somebody is interested in something, but they're a little bit gun shy because they don't know what it is, what day of weeks it meets, or how many hours it is, why don't you just ask the question? How about we do it that way, rather than do it for each one? There was another question.
Yeah, Bob, I just wanted to clarify, where we, for the community's benefit, where you mentioned that we might chat amongst ourselves offline, that would not be more than 2 council members at a time.
Thank you for that clarification. Hopefully that's something that 2 people can sort out between the 2 of them, but we cannot have 3 council members. Even though this is a committee assignment, it's not substantive, we really should not have more than 2 people talking together at a time privately. Thank you, Rachel. Any other process points?
Yes, Bob, Junie.
Yeah, Junie.
For NLC, we can have as many council members, and I'm not sure of any other boards or commission, but I just wanted to make sure to just say that for colleagues.
Thank you, Junie. Yeah, National League of Cities, the city is a member, and any number of council members can volunteer or sign up to be on the various National League of Cities committees. We often have 4 or 5 or 6 people doing that. There is no limit. As we walk through these, I think the staff has made notations about how many council members in a few instances. Most of these are 1 or 2, with the exception of the one that Junie just mentioned. A few of them are 3, and we'll call those out as we go through them. So let's get rolling.
Well, Bob, if I'll just make one additional note following up on that, if you don't mind, that we did just have the vote this fall about how many people can be on a council subcommittee. Just to remind folks that we generally shoot for 2, but in no cases can have more than 4 on a subcommittee, because we can't have a quorum on a subcommittee. So just keep that in mind. We can stretch to 3 or 4 on occasion, but not to 5.
Great. Anything else? Okay, let's go. Okay, first one is Rocky Mountain Greenway Steering Committee. We have had Mirabai is on that one, so this one is wide open. And Carl, I believe you're the staff alternative.
And can I make a note on this here, just from Carl, that that it is inactive, but we do want to maintain a council, an official council representative, but Carl can take point. So anybody who volunteers for this, there's basically nothing to do. We just need your name.
There's going
I
to
love
be
that idea.
there's going to be a big rush on that one.
Me.
Tara raised her hand. Anybody else? Okay, Tara, it's yours to do nothing.
Thank you.
Carl, did you want to add to that? You're muted.
Comment I made about having a kind of a figurehead council member was actually for the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council.
Ah.
For the Rocky Mountain Greenway, I believe that it has been inactive long enough that there doesn't need to be any staff or elected official. So I think we can probably strike that for the time being.
Thanks for clarifying. I thought it was the same for both of them. So thanks for clarifying, Carl. So Tara, hold your horses. You can volunteer for the other one. That's the.
You can volunteer for another one that doesn't do anything. Okay, so that one we're probably going to kill, and there may be one or two others that we eliminate as well as we go through here. I think this one's going to be of interest to several people. Boulder County Consortium of Cities. Currently, it is was Adam Swedlick, who's retired. Mark is the alternative, and we have a candidate here, friend. Did Rachel already declare on this one?
I took it over on an interim basis.
Okay,
I'm
great.
happy to be in consideration to continue.
So Rachel would like to keep doing this. Anybody else want to do it?
Well,
Yeah, I'd be interested.
I'm happy to cede my position as alternate, which, by the way, involved zero work. Adam was very diligent in his service there, so I'm happy to step out as the alternate.
Thank you for your service. We had Rachel and Lauren so far. Anybody else want to raise their hand on this one?
Me.
Tara?
How long is it?
It is, I believe, a 2-hour meeting once a month on a Wednesday evening.
Perfect.
Okay. Anybody else on this one? Taylor, since you've got the stick here, can you kind of highlight that one somehow, just so we know that that's one we have to come back to? Thank you. That'd be great. Colorado Municipal League. This is one where Municipal League has conferences and anyone can go to that. So this doesn't limit people attending conferences, but then we do have a designee. And Junie, I think you and Sam have done this one. Do you want to speak a little bit to this and whether you want to continue that one?
Thank you, Bob. I really enjoy being a member of the Colorado Municipal League Policy Committee. And I've been doing it for the past 2 years. I enjoy it. I'd love to continue. It's an opportunity to know what other municipalities are doing as well, or in the state of Colorado, and also an opportunity to lobby to the state. And with the support of Carl Castillo, I think we've been very involved as a city. And I'd love the opportunity to keep doing it because I really enjoy that work.
Okay, is this Junie, you probably know, is this one that we usually have 2 council members on, is that right?
Yes, we have 2 council members and then Castillo is a third. So whenever one of us is not there, we have 2 votes. So, and it meets on Friday from 10 to 1, I believe, 10 to 1. And then Carl can correct me if I'm wrong. Last Friday it was 10 to 1.
Yeah, that's correct, Judy. They meet about 4 times a year, and they're typically between 10 and 1:30.
4 times a year.
On a Friday, 4 times a year. Correct.
Okay. And so the next meeting is not until probably March, is that right?
Actually, I think they might have a meeting sooner, but I'm not exactly sure when it is.
Okay. And so Junie sounds like wanted to continue to do that. Anybody else? And Rachel's observed that we should probably say our names out loud just so we're not just going, I do. That'll make it easier for Taylor. So who else in addition to Junie would like to do this?
I do.
Aaron,
When I say
And
I do,
Matt.
I can switch from anything to anything else. I'm not saying I want to be on everything.
Okay,
So I
that was-
do.
In addition to you got Tara, and did I hear Aaron raise
And
his
Matt.
hand?
Yeah, I have an interest in this. It's not, I can be flexible, but there are definitely some synergies in this work and some of the other advocacy and policy work that I'll be doing as mayor.
Okay, so we're looking for 2 and we've got 4. Anybody else? Okay.
I'll just mention, this one is at the top of my list, just for reference, since you asked for that, Bob.
Good. Taylor, can you put a little star by Matt's name? Okay, anybody else top of the list? Anybody else want to volunteer? Okay, can we highlight that one also, Taylor, please, since we're oversubscribed on that one? Thanks. Okay, let's move on. Next one, Denver Regional Council of Government. I don't know why my name is on that. I am not volunteering for that. Aaron has done a brilliant job on this over the years and procured literally millions of dollars for transportation projects for the city. Aaron, is that something that you want to or can continue?
So I was thinking about letting this one go. I've really enjoyed working on Dr. Cog for the last 6 years, and I've invested a huge amount of time in it and relationship building and such, but I am very busy with the various things associated with being mayor. And also it's good to have people training on this so that they can continue on this for a while. I think, ideally we'd have somebody who could commit to this for 4 years, if possible. So that, because it is a significant commitment. It's 2 meetings a month, Wednesday afternoon from 4 to 6, and another Wednesday from 6:30 to 8:30 to 9:30.
So this one's actually my first choice. This is Nicole.
Okay, Nicole's first choice. Put a star by Nicole's name, please. That's her first choice. Anyone else on this one? Junie?
Yes, I just want to add, Bob, I'm an alternate. I am happy to remain the alternate. Aaron did an amazing job. He was there most all the time, I would say, except for maybe once or twice I attended a meeting for him. So I appreciate his commitment, and I'm happy to still be the alternate unless someone else wants it.
So if you know Junie as an alternate, please, Taylor. Anyone else want to raise their hand either as the principal or the alternate?
This is Mark. I would have, but if it's Nicole's first choice, I would prefer to defer.
That is gracious of you, Mark. Thank you. Anyone else would like to defer to Nicole? Okay, Nicole, looks like you got it. And Junie, thanks for being Nicole's backup.
And thanks so much, Nicole, for stepping up. We'll debrief at length, I promise. One thing on this, if I could make a request, I'll mention again later. I would like to do, if possible, one more meeting next week. And so if we could do an effective date after the end of next week, Nicole, we can chat about that. But
and perhaps Nicole could Nicole eavesdrop on that meeting and watch you perform your final duties?
Absolutely.
Great. Metro Mayor, is that you, Aaron?
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
This is my first choice. So,
well, you don't have to waste the first choice. You're stuck with it. National League of Cities. Let's skip that one because, as has been observed, any number of us can serve on that. And when we get closer to their annual meeting in March, we'll kind of maybe spend a little bit of time with the new council members and talk about committee assignments and whatnot. So let's just skip that. It could be 9 people. It doesn't really matter. Next one is Resource Conservation Advisory Board. This has been done by Adam Swetlick. And I don't know how often it meets. Looks like a Boulder County towns. Aaron, do you happen to know on this one?
It might be monthly.
Yeah, I believe it's once a month. I'd be interested in doing it.
Okay, Lauren, thank you. Anybody else? Lauren, it's yours. Rocky Flats. Is this one that Tara was going to volunteer for?
Yeah,
No.
this was the one.
No, it wasn't.
We just volunteered you. This is one that sounds like it's not a whole lot going on,
Yeah,
Tara.
so-
Okay,
Yeah,
all right
yeah,
then.
this is what I meant, the one I meant when we were talking about the Greenway one, about that we just need a nominal council representative, and then Carl and Taylor will step in as necessary to attend the actual any meetings.
Sounds good. Okay.
If I could just clarify, the proposal would be that the first alternate would be Taylor Ryman, and the second alternate would be Marnie Ratzel from Open Space.
Great. You'll note that. Okay, you get that there.
Thanks,
Super.
Josh.
Let's move on to
Hold on. Can you tell me what day and what time that meets in day, Carl?
It's been a while since I attended, so perhaps Taylor might be able to.
Yeah, I can jump in here. They meet on Mondays. I believe it might be quarterly, and it's a morning meeting. It goes from, I think, around 8 to 11.
But Tara, this is the one that you would not have to actually attend, that Taylor and Marnie can
Okay,
handle.
I'll take it.
okay. We got Tara on Rocky Flats. Thank you. Next one, Northwest Mayors and Commissioners. I believe this is also automatically you, Aaron. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next page, Commuting Solutions. This had been mirrored by Rachel. Do you want to speak about this one, and also whether you want to move from alternate to the main candidate?
I'm happy to take it over. I went once when I first started, and then I was never asked to substitute again. So the meeting I went to was at like 7 in the morning in Broomfield, I think, on a Wednesday or something. Is any staff able to confirm that that's? And I'm assuming they're doing it on Zoom, but I haven't subbed.
I used to attend that one, so I'm happy to do it or be an alternate.
Okay, let's put down Tara. Anybody else would like to do that one?
I'm happy to consider it again.
Okay.
I'm
Rachel?
interested in it as well. This is Matt.
Matt, okay.
Rachel, you're really volunteering for the early morning meeting in Broomfield?
I'm probably better off as an alternate, honestly.
And
I hope it's Zoom now.
Do you want to be listed as an alternate, or do you want to be a
alternate is a better spot for me.
Okay, so please, Taylor, indicate Rachel as the alternate, and then Tara and Matt will duke it out. And I assume that's not a first choice for either one of you.
Correct.
Okay, so highlight that one, please, Community Solutions, and then Tara and Matt will take that offline on who's going to do it. Okay, let's move on to Mile High Flood District. This has been traditionally, for Boulder at least, the mayor pro tem. I did it when I was mayor pro tem. I think, Aaron, you did as mayor pro tem. Junie, you just finished doing it as mayor pro tem. Does anyone have any objection to Rachel stepping into this as mayor pro tem?
Couldn't think of anyone more qualified.
Thanks, Matt.
Rachel, you'll enjoy it. It's actually it's a great organization. You'll really enjoy it.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, Aaron, do you want to speak a little bit to the State Highway 119 Coalition?
Yeah, so this is the coalition that's working on getting the bus rapid transit and associated bikeway built between Boulder and Longmont. It has representatives from Boulder County, City of Boulder, City of Longmont, and a couple of the other organizations, CDOT and RTD. And I've been doing this for a few years now. I'm happy to talk to other people about it. I am interested in staying on this one if folks would have me, as I have been working on this project for a number of years and hoping to help see it to the next stage of completion.
Okay. Anybody else want to unseat Aaron on Highway 119? Okay, your institutional knowledge weighs heavily in your favor, Aaron.
Thanks.
Speaking of state highways, how do we move on to State Highway 7?
And this is one I am happy to have somebody else hop in on if they would like. This is a similar concept to 119 about getting the bus rapid transit and other improvements made between Boulder and all the way out to Brighton. And so there are about 10 jurisdictions that send elected officials to this one. And so if somebody else would like to step in on this, I'm happy to. There could be some synergies with Dr. Cog, but also synergies with other things or just anybody who's interested. So
I'm interested.
And before we go, hold on, I say, did we set up an alternate for Highway 119?
I don't believe we did. Thanks for pointing that out.
Thank you. Who was the alternate before? Adam. Okay. Anybody want to be on the 119 alternate?
I'm happy to, but Aaron's track record means I probably won't get to do anything.
You probably won't. So Matt is the alternate. Okay, thank you. And on highways number 7, Aaron is indicating he's willing to step aside. Nicole, is this something you would like to do as part of your Dr. Cog obligations?
Possibly. I think I would like to know a little bit more about what the time commitment is and when and.
Yeah, so the meetings are quarterly. They've been remote for the last year and a half. They go for about an hour and a half, I want to say. And I haven't heard if they're coming back in person anytime or not.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I can probably do it, but did I hear somebody, I think somebody, was I imagining, Tara, that you were jumping in?
No, I could do it and just
Oh,
not
you're
do,
interested?
I can get off commuting solutions and do this if you want. I'm interested, but it's not my number one, but I'm happy to do it. It's up to you, Nicole.
I can go either way. So I'm not going to fight anybody over this one, but if it's helpful for me to be in there or be as an alternate or whatever, I'm happy to do that. I don't want to take it from somebody who wants it, is what I'm trying to say.
I like it too, that it cleans up the other disputes so far between Tara and Matt, if Tara does this one.
There's no dispute. Matt can do commuting solutions.
Okay, so please take Tara off community solutions and on to 7. And Nicole, would you be willing to serve as an alternate to
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tara on this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Nicole's an alternate, and then take Tara off, please, if you go scroll back up to community solutions.
Thank you, Tara.
You're welcome.
There we go. Take Tara off that one. We still have, yeah, okay, then so that you can unbold that one then, since we have Matt and then Rachel's an alternate, so that one's good.
And while we're here, Taylor, could you change on the 119 Benjamin to alternate, just to clarify that, please?
Yeah, thanks. Good. Well, by the way, we'll have asked Taylor to circulate this to us tomorrow, so we'll try to clean up any errors in real time. Where are we going to go from here? Are we done with outside? There we go. Okay, we're done with outside things, or at least intergovernmental stuff. We have some nonprofits to do. So these are internal committees. I'll speak to the audit committee, which I'm happy to step off of, by the way. The audit committee meets about 3 times a year, once in April, once in June, and once in July. Our job is to look over the shoulders of the people who are looking over the shoulders of city staff. We have an outside independent auditor who comes in to evaluate if there's any problems with our financial matters. The committee has historically consisted of 3 people. I see that there's at least a requirement that there be 2. Historically, it's been 3. I don't think there's any magic to that. And in addition to the 2 or 3 council members, also Dr. David Gross from the University of Colorado serves on that committee as an independent member as well. It's a pretty light lift, 3 1-hour meetings. Mark, you've been on it for a couple of years. What else is missing from that?
Excitement.
Excitement.
It is an audit committee after all.
It is important, but it is not exciting.
Yes.
And I'm happy to yield. Mark, do you want to stay on it?
Yeah, I will.
Okay. So that's good for continuity's sake. Who else would like to serve on this one?
Bob Junie.
Junie would like to. Great. Anyone else?
Only need to have 2.
We only need to have 2. So if it's Mark and Junie, that's perfectly fine. Going once, going twice, sold. Okay, Mark and Junie, you're it with Dr. Gross. Okay, boards and commissions, and this is a committee that might change a bit as the year evolves, but this is the board that's meant to check in on our 20-odd boards and commissions to make sure that they're happy campers. Aaron, other comments about what you and Mirabai have done over the past year or 2 on this one?
Yeah, it's really, we haven't actually had a meeting per se, but it's just need driven. So if there's a board that's having some kind of conflict or difficulty, then staff would reach out to us and we would try to negotiate that challenge that they're having. Or if boards have had vacancies, we've proposed an approach to filling those vacancies. So it's really, a few emails here and there, a few phone calls here and there. And I do not need to do this. I'm happy to hand it off to, say, newer folks. It is good to have had some board experience to be on this commission, but not required. And Mirabai hadn't been on the board.
Who has had board experience?
This is my #1 pick. I don't care about the others.
Tara, who just came off the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. Who else has had board experience?
Lauren.
Me, pick me.
Lauren. How about that? Anybody else? Okay,
Sarah,
we
did you have
got
something to say?
I just wanted to add that this committee, along with the engagement committee, will probably be addressing some of the proposed recommendations and changes to board and commission process and engagement improvement. So the scope of this committee might be a little bit more robust than it has been in years past. So I just want to make sure that the kind folks who are volunteering are ready to get into the ring with us and work through some of these details.
Well, I can't
Thanks
think of
for
anybody
letting
better
us know.
I can't think of anybody better than Tara and Lauren to help us improve how things work with boards and commissions. Okay, we're good there. Charter and Elections Committee. Rachel, you've been on this. Tell us a little bit about it and whether you want to stay on.
I am willing to stay on for continuity, but it is certainly not anything that I need to do. So we are looking at recommended charter changes or election related issues. So we have a subcommittee. It was me and Mirabai and Mary. Unfortunately, I had like one meeting before pandemic. And so I don't think I have probably the best working knowledge of kind of how that group is meant to look and work. So mostly what we did during my tenure was look at a couple of issues that were referred by city council that we knew we wanted to come up with ballot language that was proposed.
I would like to join Rachel if I could on this one.
And Matt and Rachel's willing to. Anybody else? This one has historically had 3. It doesn't have to have 3.
I'll throw a name out.
How about that name being Mark?
Oh no, I'm going to nominate other people.
I have a process question on that point, Bob, because the same question kind of came up under audit. Like, is it not preferable if we stick to 2 unless there's like a real slugfest over, limiting it because of the language change? Like, don't we want 2 more than 3 for most? I see.
Yeah, that's I think the word up there in the bright yellow at the very top, it says generally 2.
So even
Can I just jump in?
Yeah, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, Rachel. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to add, if there is a reason that council wants to do more than 2, it would just be helpful if you could specify the reason for not following the general rule, just for transparency's sake.
Okay. Before we do that, do we genuinely have 3, or Rachel, this one sounded like you were a little ambivalent about?
Yeah, again, I'm happy to continue just if we want the institutional, the vague institutional knowledge that I bring to that position, but definitely don't need to do it. So if Mark is wanting to do it, I will defer.
Well, and if you want to do it, I'm happy to defer. We can flip a coin, the winner gets off.
Well, let me suggest this. Matt's ideal for this committee because since he's worked on election stuff already, and Mark, you would be great as new blood. Would you guys mind if it was a 2-person committee with Rachel being a consultant to you guys to the extent that it's transition of institutional knowledge?
Absolutely.
Rachel, would you do that? Good. So we'll take Rachel off as an official committee member, but Matt and Mark can reach out to Rachel whenever they'd like. Okay, good. Next one, retreat committee. I'll speak to this one. I've actually been on the retreat committee for since I've been on council. It's actually kind of fun. Rachel thinks that. Rachel joined me this year. I've had various partners through the years, and I guess you'll determine in a few weeks whether we did a good job. It starts meeting in September or October. We have probably 4 or 5 meetings kind of ad hoc during the course of the fall to plan the retreat. We try to make the retreat fun, but also productive and informative. And when we have new council members, as we do this year, we also try to include some exercises to help people get to know each other, which we'll be talking about next week. And so this is a committee that I'm willing to continue on, but I don't need to. I would make a suggestion that if we have 2 people on this one, it'd be maybe a continuing council member who's been to a few retreats, and then maybe a new council member.
So this is Nicole, and I'm happy to take this one because I love planning retreats, but I'm also happy for somebody else to take it if it's somebody's first choice or top choice.
Good, Nicole.
But I love retreat planning.
Good. Sounds like you've done some. Anybody else? Rachel, I know you've done this is this your first year doing this?
You know, it's my first year, Bob. Yes, it is. I've left a big impact in that time, apparently. Yeah, I'm happy to be the one continuing. If this is not a top choice for you, I go either way. It's really fun. And Heather's good to work with, and more time with our wonderful staff. So,
well, why don't you do? I've done it literally for 6 years, so I don't need to keep doing it. And maybe the retreats will be better with you and Nicole. I think you were muted there, but was that a yes?
Yes, for my name being in, but I think I saw Lauren also.
Oh, Lauren, I'm sorry. Lauren, did you want to serve on this one?
I was going to throw my name in the ring, but I'm also happy leaving it to Rachel and Nicole.
Okay. Well, let me ask Rachel a question. Rachel, how important do you think it is for, there's no substantive continuity. And by the time you guys plan the 2023 retreat, you will have been through one retreat. Rachel, do you think that this is something that Nicole and Lauren can do without somebody who's been to multiple retreats?
I mean, that's a loaded question. Yes, Nicole and Lauren can do anything that they said.
That was the answer I was hoping for.
I think that it probably would be helpful to have somebody who's been through the cycle, at least this first year, because they won't have been through a midterm retreat yet, and there are some differences there. So I would probably do one new and one old, but not because I don't think they're capable.
I'm 100% okay with, let me withdraw my.
Same. I was going to say the exact same thing. So yeah, Lauren, you would plan an excellent retreat too.
And the other thing I think is maybe we just all leave our names in and then see, like, maybe at the end of all this, we, Taylor can say, how many committees is everybody on? And we can see, like, if Lauren's already on 7 and Nicole's already only on 6, then, it goes Nicole's way or my way or whatever.
Sure. Let's do that one. Add Nicole's name there, please. And then maybe highlight that one as one that needs to be worked out. I, for one, am perfectly comfortable with both Nicole and Lauren planning the 2023 retreat. And they can obviously reach out to Rachel or me or Aaron, who's done a lot of retreats, if they need any advice. We've got a retreat facilitator who's fantastic, and we've got great staff. They're all fantastic. So, and you guys will have been through at least one retreat. So I'm confident that you can do it, but we'll put everyone's name down, then we'll sort that out later. Council Evaluation Committee, we have 3 employees, council does, the city manager, the city attorney, and the municipal judge. And once a year in the summertime, 2 members of council working with our HR staff takes input from all 9 council members about how they're doing, and then amalgamates that information, brings it back to council and the community, and then actually sits down with the 3 employees to provide them that feedback. That has, for the last year or two, has been done by Sam and Mary. My name is up there only because, and Rachel's should be as well, because as Sam and Mary walked out the door, they said to Rachel and me, "Tag, you're it," but only on a very interim basis. And so we're not really on the committee right now. And so there's 2 open spots here. This is another committee that I think it would be good if a senior person and maybe a newer person did it. The senior person can provide continuity, the newer person to then start planning for years, 3, 4 out. Who would like to do this? This is probably 2 or 3 meetings once a year in the kind of summer, fall timeframe.
Bob, I'm interested, but the thing is, you mentioned senior person. Does that mean a senior person who's been through the process? Because I have not.
You're a senior person, Junie.
Okay.
I just meant somebody who wasn't just sworn in.
Okay.
Nobody's been through the process really, because Bob and I have not.
We've never. None of us have done this actually. So.
So this is something. I mean, I do this a lot in my other job, so I'd be happy to if it's helpful.
Great.
I don't feel like I have to, but if it's
Okay,
helpful, I can.
we got Junie and Nicole. Anyone else? Okay. Done. Let's see. Intergovernmental Affairs Committee. This is one that has had historically a lot of council members on it. And matter of fact, Rachel and I stepped off for that reason earlier this year. Aaron, Junie, and Mark, I guess I'll maybe turn to you first. Is this something that any of you are interested in continuing?
Yeah, I would.
Mark,
yes. Yes, I am interested.
And Aaron, yes. I think it's important for the mayor to serve on this one because there is a lot of interconnections with other cities. Junie, is this something you want to stay on?
I'd like to stay on it. And part of the reasons why is I think it's a good bridge between this particular committee and CML.
That's a good point. Anyone else want to serve on this one?
I would also be interested. I kind of dropped off because we were beyond a quorum and so tried to make space. So I feel like I didn't quite get an opportunity to do it, but also I think there are so many people interested in this that I just wonder if there's a path to it. Like if nearly everyone wants to do it, is it something that doesn't need to be a committee that we can all be looking at?
Carl's real good about bringing back to all of council big decisions on legislation as it is progressing down in Denver. I think it is also helpful for Carl to have a smaller subset of council when things move very, very quickly. Carl, any comments on that?
I guess that a couple comments. One of them is that it's helpful to have a committee that is reflective of the council. So to the extent that council has different perspectives, I always find that having those varying perspectives represented on the committee is important. I also agree that I think the mayor is an important one since he in this case would be involved with a lot of the advocacy. I do think CML is another logical connection. But I guess most importantly, since this committee might be making decisions in the absence of council's ability to do so, having the committee reflect the diverse ideological perspectives of the council is probably the biggest goal.
Okay. It does seem like a diverse group right now, the four names that have surfaced. Anybody else want to serve on this committee before we?
Yeah, this Nicole. I'm also interested in this
Nicole?
one.
Okay. And so
Yeah, as am I, but yeah, so.
Okay, no, but everyone listen, just because we should put all the names down of anybody who wants to do this.
Because I threw my name at CML and those synergies, as have been pointed out, are pretty obvious.
Yep. Okay,
Sandra, did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I guess I just want to remind folks that this is one which is subject to the new Charter Amendment 9.
Yep.
And while it says that there's no known limit, that's since been changed because of that new Charter Amendment. So it's subject to that rule that it's generally 2, not more than 4.
Yeah. I think we're aware of that. Did I hear Nicole's name also?
Yes.
Nicole, yeah. So let's make sure to put down Nicole's name. So we're at 6, looking to get down to no more than 4, ideally 2 or 3, but certainly no more than 4 because we can't have a quorum. This feels like it's one that needs to be taken off the line. And I know there's 6 people, and that's awkward to have a conversation. Does anyone want to withdraw now, or do we? Go ahead.
Well, Bob, I think we also could get to the end and then see what other provisions we might have, because that might help people say, well, I'll drop this one, but keep the other one.
Okay, let's do that. Financial Strategy Committee. I don't think I volunteered for anything yet, so I'm going to volunteer for this one. I'm going to put it down as my first choice. And I think, let me pause there. This actually has specific terms, and Junie and Mark are scheduled to serve the second year of 2-year terms. And the idea was, this committee was formed just a couple of years ago. And so the idea is they're staggered terms. So this would be a 2-year term starting right now and going to the end of 2023. So that's the one I'm volunteering for to fill a Mary spot. Junie and Mark, I assume that you want to fill out your terms. Is that right?
Yes.
Junie?
Yes, Bob, thank you.
Okay. No, I think this is a 2-year term. Don't put down 1-year term because Junie and Mark will then come off. So the idea is to kind of stagger terms. Mary just did a 1-year term so we could get the staggering started when we first started this committee. Anybody else want to serve on this one?
I have a question, Bob.
Yep.
So if the terms are going to end in 2022, could people put their names in now to assume those terms starting in 2023? Because we won't have this conversation again, will we?
Yes, we will. We have this conversation every year. If someone wants to express an interest now to be Junie or Mark's successor, they can, or they can express that when we do this drill again next year, November, December.
Okay.
Bob, this is Nicole, and I'm very interested in this, just from thinking about especially the racial equity allocation of resources and policies.
Okay, great.
What's the time commitment, Bob, on this one?
Mark, you want to speak to that?
This is a relatively heavy or heavier lift. We don't meet every month, but sometimes we meet twice a month, usually for about an hour and a half. And there's generally a fair bit of material to absorb, including, of course, the draft budget before it is presented to council. And last year we dealt with issues such as the COVID budget crisis, then the ultimate budget, and the infrastructure bill. So we had a lot to do. I suspect we may have a little less to do going forward, but it's a pretty robust assignment.
Can I add? I think it goes back to something that Nicole just mentioned. This is a really, really interesting, if you're looking for something interesting that is very nuanced and complex, I think it's a really, really good committee to join. You will discuss issues such as racial equities when you're looking at, what should be on the budget and what, budget cut should happen. So I really think if you want something interesting, this is where all the action is. I really think it's fun.
Thanks, Junie. Thanks, Mark. Any other volunteers for this one? Okay, since we're technically oversubscribed in this one, this is something that Nicole and I will take offline and work out. So if you could highlight that one, Taylor, that'd be great.
Can I ask, would there be the possibility of having a fourth member on this committee? This isn't, we set it up with 3, but could we add a 4th?
Sandra, do you want to comment on that? If assuming that we can enunciate a good reason, which I'm pretty sure we would be able to on this one.
Yeah, I think that's really the crux of it. If you can, establish a reasonable reason, I think that the charter would allow for it.
Okay. How do council members feel about that?
Well, since I mentioned it, I'll just say that I feel like that could work out here. This is a pretty heavy lift. It's very important stuff, and having different council members bring their unique perspectives to this very important job could be to the benefit of the city. So I think it could work out.
And I was also going to add that, considering the fact that Nicole she has a 4-year term, it's probably going to work out best if she was already there to assume the role, as opposed to me and you, Bob, who may run in 2 years or who may not run.
No, it's true. And it'd be great to have Nicole on there, although this is for a 2-year term that would end at the end of your term and my term. But yeah, it would be great to have a new person like Nicole on here for continuity's sake, in case Nicole wanted to continue that beyond 2023. Any other thoughts about having 4 council members serving? We'll work with Sandra to write up the basis for that, but anybody have an opinion one way or the other?
Is there a downside to having 4?
The meeting's public either way, so I don't think there is.
Okay.
So I might suggest that we put Nicole down for 2-year term too. That way we're very balanced. We have basically 2 people who have 1 year left in their term and 2 people who would have 2 years left in the term. So we have some staggering. And then a year from now, there can be a discussion about whether Junie and Mark want to continue, and if not, who would like to step into their roles for 2-year staggered terms. So there's kind of some symmetry to all that. Okay, Nicole, we don't have to work this one out. We just have to help Sandra draft up the language.
So I can help with that.
Great. Okay, let's move on. We're almost done. Hill revitalization. Rachel, Rachel or Mark, do you want to speak to that one?
Yeah, I'll go real quick. I've been on this committee the whole time I've been on council, and the work has really ramped up since we gave the nod of 5 to sort of try and tackle Hill kind of quality of life issues after the riot. And Mark was gracious enough to join me on the committee, and then really took it over when I was knee deep in CU South stuff. So I would be happy to continue. I think we're at a place where we might really be able to get some things done. And there is a fair amount of institutional knowledge, I would say, at this point. But I'm hoping that like the work will be done in a year or 2. So it feels like maybe a good one to continue on with.
Okay, so it sounds like Rachel. Mark, do you understand this one?
Yes, I do.
Mark and Rachel have worked well. Anybody else want to raise their hands for this one? Okay, sounds like we are continuing with our incumbents. That's great. Racial equity, we just had a long conversation about that. We've got some great people, have had some great people working on this. Erin and Junie, I guess I'd start with you, the 2 of you. Do you want to each continue this work?
As for me, no, I'd like to take on other projects with the city, and I leave it up to Erin and the other council members who wants to continue. Thank you so much.
Okay, Erin.
I'm happy to continue doing this. It's very important work that I enjoy. Although if there were other people that wanted to take the spot, I could certainly see it if necessary.
This is Rachel. I'm happy to join this. I was on it previously, and for the same reason of we were over quorum, I got off to make space.
This is Matt. I'd like to join as well.
Matt, okay.
And I was going to put my name in for this one as well, Bob. Nicole.
Nicole, great. Okay. Others? Erin and Rachel, since you've served on this before, what's your thinking about whether this is 2, 3, or 4 people?
I mean, we've had actually, well, we had more than a quorum before, so which we shouldn't do anymore. So it certainly can take 4 people. That's certainly fine. So I don't think there's any problem with that. We might start with this 4 and go to Amy Kane and see what she thinks. If she thinks 4 is a little awkward and we'd be better with 2 or 3, but she'll probably say, my guess would be that having 4 is just fine.
Okay, this is another one, then we'll need to work with City Attorney's Office for the justification for that, which I think will be easy to do.
And I guess I'll just jump in here and say, for some reason, I have a note that one was supposed to be limited to 2 because it wasn't supposed to be open to the public, but I don't know if Amy Kane is still on. If she is, maybe she can provide some insight.
Sounds like Amy may not be on.
Well, I actually, I think now that you mentioned, I do remember that it was originally just 2 people, and it was not a public meeting, and that allowed for some discussion of confidential matters that was useful from time to time. And what we did in the last couple of years is when we had more people, Mary and I were like a subcommittee that Amy could come to in cases of kind of emergency confidential stuff. I think that happened once in 2 years. So I think it was a relatively minor consideration. But again, we can check with Amy at the next meeting.
Okay, well, let's do that. Why don't we visit with Amy, and if the model that Erin just enunciated works works out, then the four of you can pick the two of you to have those confidential discussions in the rare instances that are needed. And in the event, we still do need to put together a justification on that one on having four people. Let's move on to the police master plan. This is one that Judy and I have served on. I'll just speak to it. It's a 2-year committee, which we're halfway through. And this is a good time to take a break and have new members on it. It's a process subcommittee. We're not writing the master plan. We're helping staff and a few community members identify best ways for engagement with the community so that we have as much community input as possible. The police master plan is scheduled to be presented to council in October. So that's the remaining responsibility. We've kind of finished Judy and I have finished phase 1 of this, and they're going to move in January into phase 2. It meets about once a month. There's some community members on this as well. It's a good committee and very well staffed. I think I'm going to take a pause in this one. Judy, I think you've expressed the same.
Yes, Bob. I leave this opportunity to another council member. Thank you.
So we need 2 new council members to bring this one home over the next 10 months.
How long did you say it was for?
It's 1 hour once a month.
1 hour once. If nobody else will do it, I'll do it.
Thank you, Tara.
I can do it with Tara. I'm happy not to do it as well, but I would say it's probably helpful for someone who's been on a subcommittee to also be on this one. So
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And just for the new council members, what we have done on many, not all master plans, but many master plans, we've had a process subcommittee that has helped guide staff, particularly on things where there may be a variety of community inputs or interests or needs. And so it's really to help staff ensure that the process is fair and balanced.
I'm happy to give this to anyone else, though, that wants it, just to be clear.
Okay.
Other
Does
people.
anyone else want it? Okay, Tara, you and Rachel. Community engagement. Rachel, do you want to speak to this one?
Yeah, this is an awesome committee to be on. I'm hoping to stay on it. We work through better ways to engage with the community and how we can improve as a council access to council members' time and trying to improve, processes for how we connect with our constituents.
Yeah, well said, Rachel. This is one I would also like to continue to work on with Rachel. I would say, while I don't want to exclude anybody would like to get on this committee and be new to it, we are kind of midstream. Rachel and I have, as you'll hear next week, have prepared some recommendations that we're going to be presenting. We have some other recommendations that we're developing and we'll be presenting in the first part of next year. And so I think there's a little bit of continuity that we would like to continue. That work will probably be, engagement work never ends, but the projects that Rachel and I are working on will probably be fully presented to council by middle or 2/3 of the way next year. And then maybe this time next year, if 2 other people want to pick it up and build on whatever we do this year, that would be good. Is everyone okay with Rachel and I continuing this one?
I think y'all have been doing a phenomenal job, so appreciate your willingness to continue.
Okay. No objections. It'll be us for another year. Okay. We are now on to, we have a handful of nonprofit boards that for various reasons we send a representative to. First one is BAMOCA, and this is one that you have done for a couple of years, Aaron. Do you want to continue this one?
Yeah, I've been at this for a few years, and but I think it's time for me to let this one go, just because my time is a little oversubscribed at this point. So would welcome somebody else taking this over. It's a great board. It's good people, creative folks. There is a board meeting once a quarter, generally lasts 2 hours. It's usually a Wednesday morning, like 9 to 11. They've been virtual for a long time. And then the holiday party. Sadly, you just missed the holiday party, which is the most fun in the whole year, but it'll come around next year.
Hey, Bob, I'm happy to throw my name in the hat for this one.
Matt, on that one. Anybody else interested in this one? We only need one. Well, it says 2 representatives, but okay, one is a council member. Okay, that's fine. And then one's the art commission. So just one council member. Anybody else want to arm wrestle Matt on this one? Okay, Matt, it's yours. Convention and Visitors Bureau. I'll speak to this one. I've been on this one for a few years. I enjoy it, and I would be happy to continue to serve on it. But if there is somebody who would like to bring fresh blood, that would be fine, and I'm happy to step aside. The Convention Visitors Bureau board just had a new executive director take over. The organization is well run, and they're coming out of the backside of COVID. They were hit pretty hard with that, as the rest of the hospitality industry was. So I'm willing to do it, but if someone has a burning desire to take my place, I'm also happy to yield.
Bob, this is Junie.
Yep.
I'm not interested in taking your place, but I would be interested in serving as an alternate.
Okay. That's great. Junie as an alternate. Anybody want to serve as the principal?
I was kind of interested in this one, but wasn't sure what the time commitment was because I've kind of hit my maximum of 5.
Yeah, no, that's thanks for asking. I should mention it's a 2.5-hour meeting every month. I believe they historically have met on Thursday afternoons.
Another question, Bob.
Yeah.
How often are you absent?
I'm not absent very often. I don't miss a whole lot of meetings, especially with Zoom. It makes it a lot easier. I think there maybe was 1 or 2 meetings last year that I might have missed.
Okay. Thank you.
The other question is, if we're moving to Thursday council meetings, how would this interfere with that?
It probably wouldn't, because it meets from 2:30 to 5 on Thursdays. It would make a long Thursday, but it wouldn't conflict.
And Bob, I have a question. Sorry. You and Sweatlick used to go together, even though he's an alternate, or is it only when you're not around he comes around?
Only when I'm not around. It's just one council member that attends.
Okay. I'm willing to cede that alternate if somebody else wants it.
Does anyone want the principal position? Okay, hearing none, I'll do it for another year. Okay, next one. Dairy, Mark.
Well, this one has changed. It used to be a monthly meeting, always on a Wednesday morning, to my great distress, after a long council meeting. But they have gone to quarterly board meetings, so it's a little bit of a lighter lift, and occasionally one can participate in subcommittees. I'm on the facilities committee for the dairy as well, and I would be interested in continuing to serve.
Anybody else want to do this one? Okay, Mark, it sounds like you're continuing.
Oh, I was trying. Sorry. I'd be interested.
That was Lauren. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, that's one that Mark because there's only one council member, Mark and Lauren need to take offline and sort out. Business improvement.
Before we go offline, can we go through everything one more time and sort of do a count of how many we've all taken on?
We will do that.
One final pass.
Yep. Okay. Business Improvement District. This is a kind of a quasi-legal board that supervises and manages the taxing district in the downtown. It requires 2 council members to serve on that. It meets once a month, although it may be moving to quarterly meetings. I think it has historically met, Mark, on Wednesdays. Is that right? Or Thursday? No, Thursdays. Thursday mornings. for about an hour to an hour and a half. Mark and I report on what's going on with council. We hear what's going on downtown. This is one I have served on for 6 years, and I am happy. It's a wonderful board, but I'm happy to yield my position to a new person. Mark, do you want to stay on this one?
Yeah, I think I would like to.
You've only done it for a year or two. I think someone with Mark would be good. Someone who would like to learn more about downtown.
Bob, I'm also interested in this.
Matt, okay. Anybody else? Tara and I serve on another downtown board outside of our council responsibility, so I think we got plenty of downtowning. Okay, hearing no one else, it sounds like it'll be Mark and Matt. Boulder Housing Partners.
I'd like to serve on this one, and this would be my first choice.
And I was interested in this one as well.
Lauren, okay. Others? Junie, you're the current incumbent. Are you willing to let either Mark or Lauren take your spot?
Absolutely, yes. I've already put out the hotline that I will not be moving forward with Boulder Housing Partners. It's a wonderful board, and I wish you a lot of fun, the next person who's taking over.
I served on it for 3 years. It is a wonderful board and a wonderful mission. Anybody else besides Mark and Lauren? Okay, that's one that Mark and Lauren will take offline, and because there's only a spot for one person. Okay, Colorado Chautauqua Association. Rachel, you're currently doing that on a interim basis, is that right?
Well, I took it over the summer because Mary had to pass the baton, like they were having their elections, I think in June or July. So yeah, I have not been at it long. This is not I don't have a long history with this board. And it's basically oversight over the houses and the restaurant and the concert venue there. So it's looking at like budget and ideas for ways to improve the Chautauqua visitor experience. So I can continue, but honestly, if somebody's got a passion for that, also happy to hop out of the way.
Okay. Does someone have a passion for it?
I wouldn't know about passion about it, but I do go there every day, so I feel a kinship with it.
Okay, kinship's good. Anybody else other than Tara?
No other people?
I served on this board for 3 years privately, so I've had I've done my Chautauqua duty.
You were going to say I've had your. Hey, listen. Quick question. Quick question. How long? What is the time commitment on this?
It's a monthly meeting. I also got on a subcommittee for sustainability and resilience there. So it depends on if you want to get on any subcommittees. That's another monthly meeting. It's a couple hours for the main meeting a month, and then.
Do you know if it's day or night?
Night.
It's a nighttime meeting for the main one. The subcommittees, I think, have different times.
Okay.
And maybe I should just put my name in, Bob, and have Tara and I just take it offline and make sure that we're not violating like their protocols by appointing someone different outside of, because that's the reason I had to take it over from Mary in the first place, was because they were doing elections. So just want to make sure that we can.
Yeah, I think you can. I negotiated this lease when I was on the Chautauqua side of things, and I think we can have our appointee come in at any point in time. I know that their cycle runs to August, but I think we can have somebody come in. But if you want to confirm that before we appoint Tara, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, maybe a staffer or whoever makes sense to just confirm that that's okay to do. That's me as an alternate if it doesn't work out somehow.
Okay. So tentatively Tara, subject to somebody not liking that, not they wouldn't like Tara, but the timing, in which case Rachel would continue. But then that would mean that we would have to appoint somebody under Chautauqua cycle in August.
Well, they appoint you to whatever the term is. It's longer than my council tenure. So you're going to be appointed to like a 5-year term or something, Tara.
Yeah, well, yeah, we just kind of ignore that. It's built into the lease, and there's another council appointee. It's actually a resident. But let's work that out with Chautauqua. I'm pretty sure that's solvable. Okay, let's move on. I think we're now to sister cities. Let's do the sister city committee first. There's a pretty strong argument that we don't need a sister city committee. We had a period of time where we were adding sister cities kind of rapidly. And so there was a subcommittee that existed that helped guide residents through the application process. We haven't had a new sister city for 4 or 5 years now, and there are none on the horizon that I'm aware of. And I'd like to suggest that we actually don't need a standing sister city subcommittee, but rather we would form an ad hoc committee if there ever was an application presented. Rachel, you agree with that? I know you've served on this before.
I mean, nominally have served on it. There's been nothing to do in the 2 years that I've served on it. So I would definitely support disbanding it.
And Sandra, is there any legal reason we have to have this committee, or is that just an accident of history?
I don't know the background on this. I could check into it. I'd be surprised if there was any requirement, but I could certainly check into it.
Does everyone agree with that we don't need this committee unless there's an application? Junie?
That was going to be my question, is that I've talked with a few community members about sister cities, and I'm wondering if someone were to bring an application forward, how would that process go without having this sister city subcommittee?
The way it works, at least the way it's worked for the last 2 or 3 new sister cities that we've had, is somebody doesn't just dump an application on our lap. They actually come and they usually sit down with the city clerk and say, hey, we're thinking about doing it. How do we do it? And so we have a lot of advance warnings. That's what happened with Kathmandu, Ramat Negev, and Nablus, which are the 3 cities that were added in the last 5 years. And so I think what would happen is residents would get together, they would come to the city, and the city clerk would say, okay, it sounds like and the city clerk would walk them through the process. That's the moment we as a council, I think, would come together and say, sounds like we need to have a ad hoc subcommittee to help XYZ city get formed here over the next few months. Rachel, Aaron, is that your recollection?
It is, yep. And I think we could form an ad hoc committee very easily if that comes up.
Okay. So let's not form a sister city committee now, unless it's necessary. We have council liaisons to the 10 sister cities. The level of effort varies depending on how active that committee happens to be. These are all resident committees. The city doesn't spend money on these. And some of these sister city committees meet kind of regularly, but they don't necessarily expect a council member there. Every once in a while, they organize a trip, and council members are welcome to go on that at their own expense. We have traditionally, at least the mayor has not served on the as a sister city representative, but that's obviously your prerogative, Aaron. But we have more sister cities than we have council members, so there's usually 1 or 2 people have to double up. So I guess I'd start with Aaron. Aaron, do you want to stay on with Jalapa?
Yeah, given that we have more sister cities than council members, I've been the Jalapa representative for many years. I'm happy to keep doing it.
Okay, so let's just go through them one at a time. Bob would like to stay on as Dushanbe. Any objection to that? Okay, Aaron would like to stay on Jalapa. Mark, would you like to stay on Kathmandu?
Happy to cede to anyone who wants to do it.
But you're willing to do it if no one does?
That's correct.
Okay. Anyone want to?
I'm interested in this. Matt, Kathmandu.
Matt is interested in Kathmandu. Okay, so put Matt down, and Mark's willing to cede that one. Anybody else on Kathmandu? Okay, we need somebody on Kisumu.
I'm fine to do that.
Who is that? Tara? Okay, great. Lhasa. Rachel, do you want to continue that one?
I could, but I think somebody might be able to do it better. It's got a pretty active representative from the organization, and so happy to seat it, especially if somebody's interested and can give the time.
Anybody interested in LASA? Rachel, if there's no interest, are you willing to continue it?
I can.
Okay, I think we'll default to incumbents here. Okay, Mary Young did Monte, Mexico. Anyone would like to do that in her place?
I would be happy to take a Spanish speaking city.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. I would like to, on Nobles, I'd like to offer that to somebody else because I would like to switch. I've been doing two. I'd like to do Ramat HaNegev in lieu of Nobles. Since I've done Nobles for a few years, I'd like to move to Ramat HaNegev. Some members of the committee have asked me specifically at Ramat HaNegev to do that. We'll get to that in a second, but does anyone want to do Nobles? Who doesn't have a sister city yet? Judy has one coming up. I think Lauren, we don't have you down.
I was hoping for Yamagata.
Yamagata, okay. Let's jump ahead to that. Let's put Lauren down for Yamagata. Anybody else want Yamagata? Okay, who are we missing? Oh, Mark. Mark, you can't just like do none.
Of course I can.
Junie, do you want to stay with Yateras, Cuba?
Yes, I've been very active in engaging with that particular sister city, and hopefully there might be a trip in our future. But if anyone else is interested as well, I'm happy to hand it over.
Okay, Mark, your pick, Novelist or Ramat HaNegev?
Mark, if you want Kenya, I'll take Nablus.
No, not. I'll take Ramat.
Okay, Mark's down for Ramat. Anybody want Nablus? I'll keep it. I'm happy to keep doing it, but if anyone wants Nablus, I'm happy to yield it also. Okay, Bob's on Nablus. So did everyone end up with the city? I think so. Yes. Okay. Is everyone happy with their city? Okay, good. Okay, we got that done. Okay, it's now 9:31. We're at the scheduled end of our meeting. Someone suggests we go back through and just review these very quickly to make sure that somebody's not overburdened or under committed, and to see if there's any yielding on the oversubscribed one. So let's just go through real quickly. So on Rocky Mountain Greenway, did we end up with somebody on that one?
That's disbanded.
Disbanded. Okay, we're not going to do anybody. Boulder Consortium of Cities, we've got 3, and we need how many?
Rachel will get out of the way for that one.
Rachel, get out of the way on that one. Can we do 2 on that one? What's the rule on this one? Do we know?
It's 1 plus 1 alternate.
Thanks,
Just
Sandra.
do alternate. I don't want to be a main.
Okay, so
It's Lauren's #1 choice, right, Lauren?
Well, I was that or Boulder Housing Partners, but Boulder Housing Partners was Mark's #1. So if I took consortium, I could give Mark Boulder Housing Partners.
oh boy, we are being so cooperative tonight. Okay, we got Lauren on that one with Tara as an alternate. Okay, Municipal League.
Although we did have also Wallach as an alternate already there.
Oh, Mark, you could be an alternate. I don't care.
No.
Mark's happy to have Tara be an alternate.
Yeah, that was previous alternate. I think don't look at the top line, just the lower lines.
Okay.
On CML, I don't want Junie has been doing a great job. I don't want to displace her, and I hear this is Matt's top choice, so I'm fine to step back from this one.
Me too. I'm off.
Okay.
Oh, well, thank you guys. I appreciate that. I was going to ask about the need for those synergies between that and the intergovernmental or legislative committee. So, but if it doesn't require synergy, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
I have a question, Bob.
Yep.
Thank you. As far as the staff alternate, because I understand that, Aaron, you're stepping off, but I wonder if Carl could talk a little bit about that. Is it, should I say necessary? I don't know what's the proper word, but is that third position, could it be Aaron, or would it be, would that not be a good thing, basically? That's what I'm asking.
I'm happy to weigh in on that. So, well, traditionally it has been me as the alternate, but in terms, I guess I would make an argument that it might be important to keep me as the alternate, because if you're not an alternate, you're not allowed to go to the meeting. If you're not allowed to go to the meeting, you're left out of the discussion on legislation that is important to the city. That being said, you are entirely right, Junie, that if council wanted to, they could appoint 2 council members as representatives and a council member as an alternate.
It sounds like it's important to have Carl in the room, though, since he's carrying the water for us on all things legislative, right?
Yeah, Junie, I appreciate the question. If Carl could attend, if you weren't the alternate, I'd say maybe I step in. But if the only way to get Carl in the room is to be the alternate, then that's the most important thing, I think. So thanks for explaining that, Carl.
Okay, so it sounds like we got Junie and Matt with Carl as the alternate, and that one can be unbolded then. No further discussion on that one. Okay, let's just go through quickly. Okay, we're good on Dr. Cog. Whoops. Okay. Good on Dr. Cog, good on Metro Mayors, good on National League of Cities. That'll just get sorted out. Sorry. You were all way ahead of me. We're good on RCAB. We're good on Rocky Flats. We're good on Metro Mayors. Okay. We're good on all of those. This will get sent out to everybody. We're good on that one. Good. And as we go along here, kind of like keep a mental note of how many you're on in case you want to drop off of something.
I'm worried that I have too many. I'm worried about police master plan. Does anybody else want to do that?
I'm also worried about that one, Tara, and was going to bring it up against recycled bag. And I guess I also wanted to ask, like, do we still need a subcommittee for that? Like, are we sure we need that subcommittee to continue?
Process? Oh yeah, absolutely we do.
And with council support?
Yeah, we do. We definitely do that. It's only for another 10 months, but it's super, super important.
It is a short-term commitment at this point, relatively speaking.
So Terry, you're worried that you're overcommitted, is that right?
Well, if you're going so fast, I didn't write down how many I'm on.
You're on a lot.
I'm worried.
Okay, does anybody else want to serve on that with Rachel?
Step it up, people. Come on.
We moved so fast on that. Like I got the, kind of through Dr. Cog, and then we started, like running through. So I don't have maybe if we could back it up a little bit.
Yeah, can we back up to like number 6 maybe or so? 6 or 7.
And Bob, if it's helpful, I'm trying to tally as you go. So
Thank
I'll
you.
give you a recap here at the end.
Okay.
If we went back to 6, we could resume our tally. I was starting to tally too.
Okay, 6.
5, actually, 5.
Okay, we got 5. Okay. So let's just look at that. For those who are doing the tallying. I'd say don't count alternates because alternates usually don't come into play. So just count principals. So we've got a Matt, a Rachel, and an Aaron there on slide 5. Slide 6. Are we ready to move on to 6?
Sure.
We have a Tara on 6. Okay, 7. We have Mark and Junie. We have Tara and Lauren. We have Matt and Mark. Those are doing the box scores.
So does anybody would rather, if they don't want police, do they want Rocky Flats?
And that's really no commitment at all.
It isn't? All right, that's fine. I'll just keep that then.
Tara, I know
Senior members, what would you drop anything if you were me? You all know me.
Well, let's go.
Let's keep moving.
Let's keep moving, and then we'll see what you end up with. Okay. We got retreat committee. We're oversubscribed on that. Lauren and Rachel and
Maybe with that one, I can do what I offered to do on charter and elections and just be a consult.
Unpaid advisor. Okay, so take Rachel off of retreat. And that one you can unbold, and we're good on that one. You got Junie and Nicole on evaluations. You got way too many on intergovernmental.
I'm happy to remove my name off intergovernmental since I'm on CML now.
Okay. Still have too many on intergovernmental. That one may need to come offline. Okay, those who are keeping score, are you caught up?
Yep.
Okay. I think we're good on financial strategy. Hill, we got Mark and Rachel. We may have too many on guiding coalition, but we're going to check with Amy on that one.
And just to, if it's a clarifying note, like if they allow for, love to do it, but if it gets trimmed, I'm happy to be one of the first off that, just to make the downsizing easier.
Okay. Well, let's count Matt for time being for scoring, and then we'll come back to that. Police master plan. This is one, Tara, that you said you'd be willing to drop off if somebody else came on.
As would I.
As would Rachel. Okay. Don't hear a whole lot of clamoring on this one. Engagement, we got Rachel and Bob. Okay, moving on. Okay, we got Matt. We got a Bob. Okay, next slide. We got Mark and Lauren. Need to sort this one out. And we're good with Mark and Matt in the bid. What's next? We've got Lauren and Mark need to work out housing partners.
I think, yeah.
Okay. Chautauqua, it's either going to be Rachel or Tara.
What would you rather, Rachel?
I think you should do it since you live right there and you're kind of part of that community and you go there every day. We just need to, so I think just put like Tara with an asterisk and it sounds like Bob says it's going to work out. So.
Okay. And then the sister city, we don't have to go over that one. So those who are keeping score, who I think I'm a little undersubscribed, and Tara sounds like she's oversubscribed. Who else is?
Am I? Maybe I'm not oversubscribed. I forgot to count.
Hey, what's the score?
Yeah, I think Terry, you're about in the middle or slightly high. I think I've got you down for 5. So Chautauqua.
Okay, well, I have 5. I think some of them are pretty low commitment, right? So I think I'll be okay.
Yeah, especially Rocky Flats is one of them. So
okay.
Mark, I've got you down for 7, and I think that's before the legislative committee, which we haven't settled.
Can you tell me which ones they are? I mean, without having to cycle back.
And I could have gotten some wrong, but I've got you downtown, audit, charter, financial strategies, Hill, bid, Boulder Housing Partners, and then potentially the legislative intergovernmental affairs.
I'm happy to trim 1 or 2 of those. I would still like to do BHP as my first choice.
And that list that you just read, Aaron, that wasn't including the dairy one.
And that also is not including dairy. I will
defer on dairy then.
Can somebody tell us how many all of us have, just so we.
So I didn't count the Intergovernmental Affairs Guiding Coalition, the Police Master Plan, or the Dairy one. And I had a tally of Tara for 4, but if she did police, that'd be 5. I have me for 4, Junie for 3, Matt for 5, Nicole for 4, Aaron for 3, Bob for 3, Rachel for 4, and Mark for 5, because I left off the ones that were just, yeah. I think that's.
And I had Mark with a couple more than that.
Well, then I'm happy to divest of most of them, including the audit. The only ones I care greatly about are FSC and BHP. I'm happy to defer on the audit committee if somebody would like to do that.
Mark, not to push you one way or another, but the Intergovernmental Affairs is the other oversubscribed one.
I'd want to think about that one a little bit. I might be prepared to drop, but it's something of interest to me.
Yeah, I've certainly enjoyed working with you on that group, and so there's no question that you bring value there.
Why don't we, when we get this sent around tomorrow,
yep.
Perhaps I can look for another couple of candidates.
Well, let's do that. Let's call it good for now. This is about as far as we get normally. So it was actually probably farther than we normally get. We've got about 2 or 3 or 4 that are oversubscribed. We may have a little bit of load balancing. 2 council members, Aaron and I, are a little bit light. Mark's a little bit heavy. And if staff would send this around tomorrow morning, and also with a tally, I'd suggest ignoring the alternate ones. And then I guess where it's oversubscribed, go ahead and mark it down. So for example, Intergovernmental Affairs, each one of those 5 people would have a mark against or notation against their name. And just so we can see, if you would send that out to everybody tomorrow, and then let me suggest that we give people to the end of the week to either bow out if they want to bow out of a oversubscribed one, or in the case of Mark, if Mark wants to suggest, particularly those of us who are a little on the light side, like Aaron and Bob, although Aaron is the mayor, so he's got some other responsibilities, to take on some more responsibilities. So we all end up with kind of in the 4 to 5 zip code. Is everyone okay with that process? And let me just suggest that as these are worked out, 2 by 2, worked out 2 by 2. If somebody among the group that is working out could just communicate to Aaron as the mayor and Taylor as our support, that would be probably the best way to communicate. Don't you think, Aaron?
Yeah, I can coordinate that.
Yep.
And I'll just note, actually, I believe I'm at 5 things, so I don't believe I'm actually
okay.
Oh, okay.
Well, we'll have somebody do an official count overnight, and tomorrow we'll get an email that says what the actual count is and what's still oversubscribed. And then if people would just communicate with Aaron and Taylor by the end of the week, so that we can put together something we can vote on next Tuesday. Is everyone okay with that?
And when will we get an information on those that we're looking to expand and information, so we're not haggling before we know the answer?
I think there was only 1 or 2. Can we maybe look to Sandra for that? Okay, I don't remember which
I'm
one.
sorry. What was it that you needed?
I think Matt was wanting to know on the ones that we want to expand. Your question was, Matt, can we expand, or do we, or have we written up a justification?
Well, it was just a matter of when we know that we either can or it's a green light, because I think the guiding coalition is still up in the air whether we can expand or not.
Sure.
And so before we start haggling, might as well know the answer first.
That was an Amy call. Somebody was going to visit with Amy on that one. What was the other one?
I don't know if there was one. I'm just, the guiding one was the only one that stuck in my head.
Yeah, I think somebody was going to visit with Amy on that. One, I suggest Rachel or Aaron, somebody who's served on that in the past, could reach out to Amy.
I'll check in with Amy.
The other 2 or 3 that have more than 2 people, I think it's just us working with the city attorney on the justification for more than 2. Recognizing they would be for sure public meetings.
In order to balance the load, if anybody would like to step into my place on the audit committee or the charter committee, I'm happy to defer.
Well, I'm actually interested in both of those. I've been on the audit committee for many years, but if that's an area that is a need, because I know I'm undersubscribed. I did want to serve on the charter committee, but there was a lot of interest in that one, so I kind of cut my mouth shut.
Well, take my place.
Okay. So why don't you put down Bob for both of those, and then let's see where the numbers sort out.
Well, if you take both, then I'm down to 4, I think, depending.
Okay,
on
which one do you want to do? Which one do you not want to do? It doesn't matter to me.
Oh, you pick it. I'm good.
I actually have been on the audit committee for a really long time, like my entire 6 years. So how about once you keep doing that, since you've done it for a couple of years,
Okay.
and I wouldn't mind serving on the charter committee with Matt, if that's okay with you.
Take it.
Okay, good. Load balancing there. Okay. Well, staff, if you wouldn't mind sending that out tomorrow morning to council, and then council members, if you're affected, if you would communicate your final desires to Aaron and Taylor by the end of the week, we'll put together a packet. It may not make the Thursday packet, but we'll get something in over the weekend, so we have something to vote on consent on Tuesday. Everyone cool with that?
Okay.
Good.
That took a little longer than we projected, so our 20 minutes ahead of schedule is now 20 minutes behind schedule. Sorry for that.
Bob, thanks for navigating us through that. That's never easy, so appreciate you taking that on.
You bet. Any other business for tonight? Great, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Good job, Bob.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.
All right, good night.
Yeah.
Enjoy the first snow.